All right. I think we're live. This is exciting. First live stream on the channel. Like I said in the chat, I'm going to be just double checking, make sure everything's working all right here for the live stream. I got a whiteboard. I know people probably can't read it very well, but I just wanted a little bit of a visual, for our viewers here. Just so I put down a list of my top 10. I didn't really put too much thought into it, but just 10 notable free agents that are right there. And, really interested to see what happens with all these signings today. But unfortunately, with the way that the CFL's negotiation window works out, there's already leaks of like what players are signing elsewhere. So a lot of these guys, I'll go through this in a second when more people jump in here. A lot of these guys have already signed with their new teams. So I'll talk about that more in a second. Like I said, does everybody hear me all right? Awesome. That's awesome. Sweet. Apparently, Jaden Sankey's is agreeing to terms with Saskatchewan. Unfortunately, it's one of the names I had on the list. And, I put this list together last night. Thought there might be a few of these guys left over by the time the actual market opens, but a lot of these guys already leaked out in the last couple hours where they're going to go. So, um, you know, yeah, no, it's a big blow for Calgary, but I think they with the addition of Judge, I think that they'll more than make up for it there. They'll move Thurman from the weak side to the middle, and then Judge can play that natural weak side linebacker role that he's been used to throughout his career. So I think they'll manage, honestly. I think Calgary will manage. They usually do a good job of replacing guys, and I really like what they've done so far this offseason. But anyway. Yeah, the DB market I think is going to be very busy today. I think that honestly, when I'm looking, I actually have a bunch of sticky notes. Basically, every notable free agent over here on my desk over here, and there's just so many defensive backs that are still available that I think that that's going to be the position that we're going to see a lot of movement in today. A lot of other positions are, pretty settled around the league. I think just based on like what teams wanted to lock up in terms of offensive line. I think that's the thing. Everybody needs offensive linemen except for basically Winnipeg, and there's just not a lot of them out there. So teams moved quickly during the negotiation window to try to secure guys. So I'm really interested to see what happens. Oh, where do I think Harris will go? Honestly, I think, I think there's a couple options. I think going back to BC makes the most sense because I hear that they wanted to flip that running back position into a Canadian spot for next year. I think that would be an interesting spot, going back to where it all began for him. But I've also heard that Edmonton is very interested. Farhan Lalji of TSN was saying that. That kind of raised eyebrows for me because they already have James Wilder there. And, I don't think that's just a major needle mover to have those two, like a two-headed monster in the backfield like that. At least at this point for Harris, I just don't think he's going to get a major role if he goes to Edmonton. Other teams, maybe Toronto, maybe it always seems like they throw their hat in the ring for a lot of these guys, these bigger name guys in recent years. So it's going to be really interesting to see where Harris goes. I think he's on this list. I had to put him on this list, and like I said, I'll go through that in a second. I was a little shocked when Lawler committed to the Elks. Yeah, I think honestly that is just a pure money thing. He just couldn't say no to that contract, and what's been reported, He was originally, it was reported that BC offered 250,000 plus a signing bonus for the next 2 years, and then 250K per year. And then Edmonton just a few days ago comes in with a 300K offer for next year. So like either way, he was leaving Winnipeg, I think, just based on the limited amount that Winnipeg could pay him, given all the other guys they paid. So I think Lawler, he's a good player, and obviously he led the league in receiving yards last year, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if any receiver's really worth that much money. For context, last week, the highest paid receiver on the books for next year was scheduled to be Lucky Whitehead. I think it was like 205K. And now Duke Williams got, I think, 270K. And then Lawler gets the 300K from Edmonton. So going to be really interesting to see how these, this big spending works out for those teams on those receivers. So I got in the description, guys. So I left the CFL's free agent tracker, a link to that in the description. So if you guys wanted to follow along, 3 Down Nation also has like a live blog thing where they tweet about it as they go. They usually are the first ones to break the story on where players are going. I also have notifications on for TSN's Dave Naylor and Farhan Lalji, Justin Dunk, and John Hodge of 3 Down Nation. Those are the 4 main guys that will break stories usually in the CFL. So I'm looking at just here on my phone some quotes about how Andrew Harris and the team couldn't agree, and Winnipeg couldn't agree on a contract before the deadline. And they said, the GM said the door is still potentially open, but it's not, nothing's guaranteed at this point that he'll be back. I honestly, I don't see it with them bringing back the, I honestly just don't see it when they're bringing back Oliveira and Augustine. Who's the most overrated quarterback in the CFL? Oh, that's a really tough one, honestly. Like, it depends who you ask, because like right now, I always say it's like, okay, basically Collaris is at the top right now, I think, right? Basically the only quarterback that had a good season last year in the CFL, and then everybody else kind of had very disappointing seasons across the board this year. And what you call it? In terms of the most overrated guys, I think there are guys that think McLeod Bethel-Thompson is good. And I honestly have never been a big McLeod Bethel-Thompson fan. I think at times, in terms of the CFL media, Jeremiah Mazzoli's probably the most overrated quarterback. I honestly like, and I'm a Hamilton fan. I've watched Jeremiah Mazzoli for years, appreciate what he did for Hamilton, but I also saw some of his very low moments, and like, I just think in terms of the week-to-week accuracies, just sometimes it's all over the place with him. And I think some people think he's, they talk about him as better than he actually is. I think he was the number 1 free agent on CFL.ca this offseason, and I think I understand because the quarterback position is so important and stuff, and he is a starting caliber quarterback. But when I think a guy like Jagger Davis would have been my number 1 free agent, and he's number 1 on the board right here for me. But honestly, in terms of overrated guys, I think it depends what you look at it from. Mazzoli, I think. In terms of a lot of media guys overrate him. I think in reality is probably the 5th, 6th quarterback in the league, in my opinion. And then, I think guys like Cody Fajardo, it depends. It could go either way. Sometimes I think people are too harsh on him, but then I think other people, when he's playing well, think he is the best quarterback in the league, which he's not. He just doesn't have that week-to-week consistency and all-around ability in his game right now. At this point, it's still early in his career in terms of being a starter. Who do you think will find the most success out of those three receivers? Uh, what receivers are you? Are you talking about Lawler, Duke, and Lucky Whitehead? So out of those three guys, I probably have the most faith in Duke Williams. He was looking really good down the stretch. Um, I think he was really starting to gel with Cody Fajardo. And honestly, I think if you can get a bounce back from Shaq Evans, if you're the Saskatchewan Roughriders next year, that's one of the best receiving cores in the CFL, I think, because Kyron Moore, he's a very good receiver. Suffered an injury late last season, and that was a blow to their offense. Really good underneath threat, get the yards after the catch. I think he's one of the better guys in terms of that. But I think Lawler will do okay in Edmonton, but I'm just not too sure that he's not that 1 year, not 1 year wonder, but he does have the talent, but I don't have as much confidence that he will perform as Duke Williams is in Saskatchewan. And then, especially with the quarterback situation in Edmonton, I don't know what's going to go on there. A really interesting receiving room they're building there because they brought back Darrell Walker and they brought in those two old guys with a Darius Bowman and Manny Arsenault. So who knows what's going to happen in Edmonton this year? But I think Lawler will be okay, but I think Duke will be the best out of those three guys. And then Whitehead, I expect to have a pretty similar season to this year. I still think Brian Burnham's the better receiver, and I think a lot of people that was lost a lot in the hype of this year for Lucky Whitehead in the breakout season that he had, because he because Burnham, having a lot of that attention from the coverage and just having that all around ability, running like all different types of routes, having that consistent hands, I think that's kind of been overlooked, and he's getting paid way less than Whitehead is scheduled to be paid much less than Whitehead next season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how those two receivers really perform in BC. But honestly, I think they dodged a bullet by not being able to sign Lawler in this, just because I think that would have been very poor management of salaries, because they have a lot more needs on that BC roster right now. Thoughts on Ellingson to the Bombers? Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. I think this was, it made the most sense after they knew they're going to lose Lawler. They needed a guy that can come in. They needed a guy that is able to catch a lot of, a high volume of passes. And who better to do that than Greg Ellingson, who's been so damn consistent throughout his career. Probably had his worst CFL season, and since it's probably his rookie year, since his time with the Tiger Cats, this past season with Edmonton. But he still produced. I think he was still like top 6 or 7 in the league, despite playing on just an awful offense. I think he's going to have a big rebound year next year. And, what was it before last season? He had like 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons. So I don't know. I really do like that move for Winnipeg. I think that's probably the best one they could have made in terms of free agents out there to replace Lawler. I know this is off topic of free agency, but do you think there will be a team in Atlantic Canada? So I actually have one of my early videos on this channel. I talked about that, and that was right when the news broke, when they were pulling Halifax City Council announced they're pulling funding from the stadium. And I think ultimately it all comes back to that, getting the stadium built. And this is always the biggest question, I think, with professional sports professional sports teams is you have to have that venue to play out of right away, right? And you have to have the requisite seating. And I think if you can get the stadium done, it could potentially work long term. But I really don't see how that happens in the foreseeable future. So I'm going to say no for the next 10 to 15 years at least. We're looking that far down the road for a team in Atlantic Canada. Unfortunately, I think, and I'm going to try to do a video about this at some point about, the potential locations for expansion in the CFL. I think, and I've always said this, and I went to school in Windsor, University of Windsor. And I always said this, if Windsor and London were a little bit closer together, then they would be perfect to put a team in one of those two locations because I think they would pull from each other and together they would be able to support a pretty big team here in the CFL. But I think you could still potentially do that. But I think the prospects of doing that are a little bit more risky with just the geography of that whole situation. How it's like a 2 hour. Nobody's going to drive from Windsor to London to go see a game or vice versa. Maybe not nobody, but I know I wouldn't want to do that. So that's a possibility for expansion. I've always thought of Quebec City. Obviously, you got the sports culture around the youth sports and with Laval and Montreal and the province of Quebec. Those are a possibility. And besides that, I think you got to look, and as unpopular as it is, you got to look at potentially some of these places in the northern U.S. I think, honestly, because if you want to talk about expansion long term, if you're okay with the CFL as it is, that at 9 teams, then I understand that as well. All right. It's 11:30. What's been the most shocking move this offseason? For me, as the most shocking move. Well, obviously it's going to become official at 12 here, but Jaguar Davis, defensive end for the Hamilton Tiger-Cats, or formerly of the Hamilton Tiger-Cats, is going to sign with the Toronto Argonauts, and I think that's I thought Hamilton would really stood up and matched that offer because he was just so important to their success this past season and the past 2 seasons. Really, honestly, I think he's probably their best player on both either side of the ball, and just having that elite pass rusher is so important in the CFL today. You look at obviously what Winnipeg's been able to do, because Winnipeg has 2 of those guys in Willie Jefferson and Jackson Jeffcoat. Saskatchewan, AC Leonard. You got all these the great teams with that elite edge rushing presence, and I don't think Hamilton has that anymore now that Jaguar Davis is scheduled to sign in Toronto. So a pretty disappointing move as a Tiger-Cats fan that they weren't able to retain him there. I see what's going on. Darrigan 11. Sorry. This is my first time live streaming, guys. So if I'm a little bit choppy here or there, bear with me. But I think I'm gonna get into this, walking through this top 10 list here that I've assembled. And like I said, most of these guys have already signed. I don't know if you guys can see the board very well at all, but I'll point to what it says. Should Andrew Harris retire? I'm assuming you're talking about Andrew Harris. No, I don't think so. I think he could still like that guy. Oh, what's up, Daryl? What's going on, buddy? Should Andrew Harris retire though? I think I don't think he should retire, honestly. It would be understandable if he did, but I think that he still showed enough in the tank, especially in that playoff game against Saskatchewan, where Winnipeg, it was really the difference of them winning that game, in my opinion, was having Andrew Harris out there and having that dominant performance, because they just really weren't having their best day on offense that day. So I think Andrew Harris has enough in the tank, and I think he's only like 300 yards away from 10,000 in his career. I think that's a motivating factor for him to play one more season to get him over that historical milestone. So I don't think he should retire. But I would understand if he did. Where do the Redblacks stand right now? I have been super impressed by the Redblacks. A lot of people comparing this to, I've seen people compare this to what Toronto did last season and bringing in a lot of these big names or whatever. But with Ottawa, it's been a lot more calculated, and these are all at positions of just dire need for this team. Obviously, you got the quarterback situation. Jeremiah Mazzoli just a massive upgrade, despite what I said earlier in the stream about him being potentially the most overrated guy in the league. But guys like a Combre Williams at left tackle, huge need at that offensive line was historically bad. You think about how bad Hamilton's offensive line was to begin the season, right? The Saskatchewan, Winnipeg games, and just complete turnstiles at tackle. But Ottawa's was even worse. They're way worse last season than the Hamilton's even was. So they needed major offensive line upgrades. They got the best tackle on the market in Combre Williams, and I thought that was great. And then obviously you're bringing in a guy like Jalen Acklin, a guy that Mazzoli's very comfortable with. I think Acklin, I don't know if he's necessarily a number one guy that's going to be the focal point of your offense. I think he led the league team, the Tiger-Cats, in receiving last year, but I don't think he's I think he's a really solid addition for that offense. Apparently, they're signing Winnipeg receiver Darvin Adams as well. So, you're adding a little more depth to that receiving core. But, that's one thing I think, I don't think there's an answer out there right now, because I think a lot of the better receivers have signed. But I do think that they could use just that true number one guy. Maybe, one of these American signings they have turns into that, and we see that all the time in the CFL. But I really like what the Redblacks have done, and they're going to be a much improved team next year. Thoughts on the rider linebacking core of Tights, Dean, Sankey, and Moncrief? Yeah, that's a pretty loaded unit, and I was just thinking that based on the signings of Sankey, the rumored signings of Sankey and Moncrief this morning. I mean, that is a really, really solid unit. And, especially with that versatility with Micah Tights being a Canadian guy, they can start that Canadian in the linebacking core, especially if Larry Dean is, God forbid, he doesn't, get back to that former level that he showed prior to his Achilles injury last season. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that linebacking unit performs. I mean, I've been on record in some videos saying that the linebacking position, especially the middle linebackers, are not necessarily the most important position, especially on the defensive side, just because there's a lot of schemes. They try to manipulate the middle linebacker a lot of the time using play action and motion and stuff. So sometimes they just don't produce a lot of splash plays on a weekly basis. It depends on a lot of it depends on game script and whatnot. So, but I think this linebacking core, especially with that strong side linebacker in Moncrief, who I think is arguably the best strong side linebacker in the CFL, that can make a huge difference. If you have linebackers that can cover, it can make a huge difference, because not a lot of linebackers in the CFL are plus coverage guys. So if you have guys that can cover, and I think that it's going to be make a big difference to that Saskatchewan Roughriders defense that was already really good last year. Who got a better value, Elks or BC? Burnham and Whitehead for $300K, or Lawler for $300K? No question, BC. I mean, I think that I had a top 15 wide receivers video a few weeks ago, and I had both Whitehead and Burnham ahead of Lawler on that list. Lawler was not far behind it at the 5th spot on the list, but Burnham was 2nd and Whitehead was 4th on that list for me. So, if you have 2 of the top 5 receivers for the price of 1, I think you gotta go with BC in that circumstance. Why do you think there would be any interest in 3-down football in U.S. Border states? Thanks. I just think that honestly, because I think they do have those kind of bordering cities, like say a Detroit. They have a lot more connection to to Canada than other places in the U.S. And I think that and it's not necessarily obviously they would have to gauge how much interest there would be in a lot of these places, but I think it's more of just I look at it more from a realistic standpoint. They have the population centers that Canada just simply doesn't have. There's just not many potential areas where the league can expand. So within Canada, so I think you got to look and explore options elsewhere. And I will say a lot of these cities or like states that are like say North Dakota, Minnesota, a lot of those places, that's where a lot of these CFL guys are coming from. So guys like Brady Oliveira, I think it was Drew Wolotarski, guys like that have come from these bordering states. So that's why I say it's something that the league could explore. I think CFL teams playing a game in the States would work. Example, Montana, North Dakota, Seattle, Connecticut. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Even if you can yeah, exactly, having just a like a one-off regular season game every year just to kind of gauge the interest, and if you can promote it the right way, I think it could work, honestly. But like I said, I think these are the avenues for if the league wants to be a bigger league. These are the kind of conversations they're gonna have to have. Tiger Cats got way worse. Unfortunately, I think I agree with that just mainly because of the Jagger Davis signing with Toronto. I think that's going to be just a major blow because I think this defense is really the leader of this football team, honestly. And having that elite pass rush really made a big difference in them getting to the Grey Cup last year. I mean, if you watched Jagger Davis versus Toronto in the East Final last year, the guy was all over the place. So, I'm that loss alone, I think, is huge for the Tiger Cats. And then losing Darius Sirocco on the interior offensive line, he's a very good player. I think they do have some younger pieces that could potentially replace him. Maybe not replace his level of play, but can do an adequate job of kind of filling that role. But I think the Tiger Cats, yeah, I have to agree. They got way worse. I do think Ackland is kind of they can kind of replace him, because when I look at it, I think Addison, Braylon Addison, the guy whose jersey I have, he basically missed the whole year last year. So he's basically an addition to this team for next year. So I think with his production coming in, I think he'll be your number one guy. I really like Tim White and Stephen Dunbar Jr. I think those guys will be they're good building blocks for the future. I still think they should add another a veteran American receiver, a guy like maybe like BJ Cunningham or something like that this year. So today. So I'm really interested to see how that works out for Hamilton. But yeah, I think I agree. They got a little worse. As part of CFL 2.0, should the CFL play a game internationally? Yeah, I think honestly, they have to do more stuff like that if they're serious about this 2.0 vision working, because I don't think they're doing enough substantially right now to actually drive and move the needle in terms of interest for the CFL on a global level. Because you have the global draft, but you have maybe 2 or 3 players. I know there was a bit of a bump this year because of punters and stuff playing more, like guys like Cody Grace for Calgary, but you just don't have these guys that are breaking in the lineup becoming starting players and stuff. And you almost I think in the future, if they're really, really serious about this, they probably would have to put in some kind of a ratio for the global players to have a spot in the lineup. But I think that playing games internationally, that could be a big part of this strategy if they really want to continue to go down this road. And I think that's really been a big part of the Ambrosi tenure as commissioner. This has been one of his projects. So be interesting to see if that's one thing that they do. Yeah, so happy we got Davis. Yeah, congratulations. He's a hell of a player, honestly. One of the top 10 to 15 players in the CFL. So congratulations, Michael. How huge was it for Montreal re-signing their core guys? Honestly, I really think Montreal has a really good chance next year. And I thought they were kind of close this year. I know that the record will say they're 7-7, but they had some really, really, tough losses last year. You think that the game they lost to early in the season to Jake Mayer in his first start. But when you look statistically, they were first in a lot of categories last year offensively. You bring back the two receivers in Eugene Lewis, Jake Weineke, William Standback, obviously a beast in the backfield. You basically keep the entire offensive line. So I think offensively they're set. And then in Vernon Adams, I think with another year of development, coming back from his injury, I think the main thing with them offensively is they need to get more, more easy yards, get more of those underneath passes, because their depth of target is absurd in terms of they're just always trying to go for the home run ball. And, sometimes you just got to take, occasionally take the pass underneath. So I think Montreal, a lot of their stuff, their problems are fixable, especially on offense and defense. They showed a lot of strides this year after being one of the worst defenses in the league in 2019. Early prediction for the Tiger Cats record. I'm gonna say 10-8 ish. I think they'll be around that range. They'll regress, but I think they'll. I still think when you stack it up, I do believe that Dane Evans is the best quarterback in the East Division. It's really close with Mazzoli, Adams, and Evans, but and then MBT, he shows his moments week to week, but he's just very inconsistent. But I think I think having the best quarterback in the division will still give them a chance, a very good chance of making the playoffs. But I don't think they'll be that dominant team that we've kind of been accustomed to the past couple of years. I hope Tyler Chanowski gets more play time. Yeah, I actually played with Tyler Chanowski in high school, so it was pretty it's pretty wild seeing a guy that he played with in high school actually in the CFL. So that's it's pretty awesome. I really hope he does get an opportunity. They bring in Lamar Durant here, presumably going to be one of their Canadian starters at receiver. And so I don't know how Ternowski fits in there. He would probably have to beat Durant out unless they're going to start two Canadian receivers, which I really don't see them doing. But I think Ternowski will get more of a look next season, maybe in the return game, honestly. Play games in Canada, not international. Yeah, no, I'm just saying that as a part of this whole global strategy that they want to implement. I think they're going to have to make some tough choices if they really want to see that grow and move the needle for them business wise. Do you think the CFL should use these global leagues to develop Canadian players and American players that don't make a CFL roster? It depends how many how well aligned they are, and I don't know. Admittedly, I don't know the full extent of all the details of it, but of how all the leagues are working together, and how the whole global draft process works. But I think that um that if they don't make a CFL roster, I would always like to see player development. I never want to see guys, especially younger guys in their early 20s, that had promising university, college careers. I never want to see them, completely drop off the professional radar, because you never know. You get a lot of late bloomers, especially in the CFL, where a lot of the older players are the best players in the league. There's a lot of best players in this league are in their 30s. So, in some cases, mid 30s. So, I'm always in favor of player development, honestly, if it could be beneficial to the CFL. How much was Davis paid? I believe the report was like 240K or something like that, or 230K from the Argos for next year. So, pretty hefty price tag. That's more than Willie Jefferson got paid from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So, pretty hefty contract for him. I think they should get rid of the global roster spot and turn it into a training camp invite for global players. Each team has to bring 5 global players into camp. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they adjust these rules, because I think right now it's like, isn't it 2 players per roster have to be global, or 1? I think they changed something during the shortened season last year, but I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with the whole global situation. It's a tough debate, because you're really taken away from sometimes you're taken away from the Canadian or American players in the league. So you're taking a roster spot away from them. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they adjust that rules and the requirements to play. For all these global guys going forward, especially when there's I believe it's like a lower minimum salary you can pay for global players, which is really controversial right now in the league. And you see John Ryan, Canadian punter that just got released by Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan went with a global punter. It's a dicey debate. Due to the loss of Micah Johnson, due to the loss of Micah Johnson, do you think that Riders should get Ted Laurent? I think that would be a perfect replacement, because I believe they are also supposed to lose McConaughey Henry as well to the Edmonton Elks. So I think Laurent, he's getting up there in age. I think he's 34 years old, but he's never been a guy that's defined by his stats. And when you look at his stats last year, it's like, this guy didn't really do anything, but he really, he just plugs up the middle and, does his job. Occasionally he'll rush the passer pretty well too. So, I think that would be a very as good of a replacement as any for Saskatchewan right there on the interior defensive line, especially if they want to use a Canadian in that spot still. Is 2022 too early to start talking about the Atlantic Schooners? It's just the issue is, and I was just saying this a few minutes ago, is I think the stadium issue. You have to have a venue that's has enough seating and specs to have a professional football team out there, and that just doesn't exist right now, unless they're going to play where the CPL team plays out there and maybe add some additional seating to it. But it's. I still think we're a ways away from actually, seeing the Atlantic Schooners come to fruition, and a lot of that's due to the Halifax City Council pulling the money from the project at the beginning of the pandemic. So, news: Laurent is staying with the Ticats. Oh yeah, I got to check my notifications here, guys. Yes. Great. Yep. Yeah, that honestly shocks me that the Ticats did resign him, because I really thought they were gonna let him go after they did bring back Dylan Wynn and they added Micah Johnson. So I thought, both of those guys are interior guys, but I guess sometimes they put Wynn over at defensive end. So if they can rotate those guys well, obviously that's a hell of a trio. But I'm just kind of surprised that Teddy's going to be back, but obviously happy for it nonetheless. Defensive Ottawa Redblacks defensive end Avery Ellis to sign with the Montreal Alouettes. That's a decent signing for them. I know they lost Jamal Davis, one of their defensive ends, to the NFL. They brought back Nick Usher, who was very good for them last year. I think the defensive tackle combo there of Armando Sewell and Mike Moore, I think that's I really wanted them to bring in Kwaku Boateng just to kind of complete the 2019 Edmonton Eskimos defensive line. So, but Boateng going to Ottawa, but Avery Ellis, a pretty good addition there to shore up that defensive line for Montreal. Mm-hmm. I believe that Halifax is the best place for that team, but I feel you can play in Moncton for the time being. The Schooners are a regional team at the end of the day. Yeah, and that's really the goal, and that's really the belief in this whole idea of how putting a team out there is that it would be like kind of like a magnet. And the whole region would go to games and really fill that stadium. So I kind of believe in it from that perspective. I just think that long term though they'll have to be in the biggest population center, which is in Halifax in that region. So until a deal gets done there for a stadium, I don't see anything really moving on that front. Early standings predictions. So, I think the East is going to be really tough for the West. I feel pretty confident. I think Winnipeg will be the heavy favorite to finish first again, but I think Calgary is going to be really, really good next year. I really do think so. You think of how poorly they played to begin this year, and the fact that they still were able to finish 8-6 despite how bad Bo Levi Mitchell gets back to like kind of the player he was, a couple seasons ago. This team is going to be right up there in the Grey Cup conversation. It could challenge Winnipeg, honestly, because that entire team is just very well put together. I think they have arguably one of the best receiving duos in the league. Reggie Bagleton, Kamar Jordan, Kadeem Carey, really good running back in the backfield, good offensive line. So I think Calgary's setting up really well. I would predict them to finish second. And then for third place, I think he's still got to go with Saskatchewan, but I think it could get close. It would have been a lot more interesting if Edmonton had gotten Mazzoli. And I might have considered flipping those guys, but I think Saskatchewan, honestly, is still, you got to respect them. And I think defensively, they'll be very good. And, I think if Fajardo can have a bit better of a season than he had this year, then I think, I think a lot of the stuff for a lot of these teams relies on the quarterback. But with Saskatchewan, I think in particular, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with Fajardo next year. But I would have them third, Edmonton fourth, and then BC fifth. But I'm really cheering for Nathan Rourke in BC, and I think BC has some talent in some spots, but I think the offensive line, I really think it's going to come back to bite them again. The defensive line just not that imposing as well. So, like, I still think they're, in my mind, the worst team in the West. And then for the East is so tough, but give me Montreal to finish first. Actually, like, I think Montreal, with the continuity that they're bringing back offensively, I think they'll be very good. And then I think Hamilton to finish second. But I think Ottawa's really closing the gap right there. And then I would have Ottawa at third, and then it's really close. Like, I think I could see any of these teams finishing fourth, and I could see any of these teams finishing first. Honestly, that's how close it is on paper. I think in the East, and I think more so than the West. But I think I'm going to go with Toronto to finish last as of this moment, because I think they do have the best, the worst quarterback in the division, in my opinion. Should the Argos sign another quarterback for insurance behind MBT? Yeah, I was actually tweeting this out last night, and I'm like, because it was reported that BC is potentially planning on signing Michael O'Connor, another Canadian quarterback, to be their backup to Nathan Rourke next season. And that would leave Trevor Harris really without a, obvious landing spot. But I think, if Trevor Harris is willing to take less on a contract, one of those contracts with a lot of playtime incentives and stuff like that, then I think Toronto is a really good fit. I think, it could push McLeod Bethel-Thompson to be better. And I think, if MBT struggles, then honestly, I think I'm not too sure that Trevor Harris isn't the better quarterback. I know he's not the most popular guy in CFL circles right now, given how he played last year and, not living up to that contract in Edmonton. But I do think he is still one of the better quarterbacks, and definitely a starting caliber quarterback still in the league, especially from an accuracy standpoint. So I think Trevor Harris is a potential depth move there for Toronto. I think it's a potential good fit there. Any truth to the rumor that Harris goes to the Riders? Sorry if you covered this already. Oh, no, it's okay. I honestly think that is a really good possibility. I actually, like, when I was talking about Harris earlier, I mentioned BC as a potential landing spot, and I heard that Edmonton is interested, but I actually didn't mention Saskatchewan. But I think Saskatchewan is right up there in that conversation. I do think they actually feel very confident about Jamal Morrow, their star kick returner / running back, potentially taking the reins in that role next season. But I think that why not? Honestly, if you're the Riders, you get back a little bit at the Bombers, steal them away, and I think that could potentially be a fit there for Saskatchewan. Strong side linebacker Alden Darby will be signing with the Ottawa Redblacks. That's an interesting signing because they have reportedly signed Montreal strong side linebacker Patrick Levels as well. I think both of those guys are very established guys. Levels the better player of the two, but Darby a guy that can play also in the secondary. So I think there's no worries about the fit there. Ottawa has plenty of potential. Ottawa has a lot of potential holes they can fill in that secondary. I was seeing that they might bring back Antoine Pruneau, but I think that's a guy I think that's I think his best days are behind him at that safety spot. He'd be a good backup for somebody, but I don't think he's necessarily a starting safety in the CFL at this point. I was hoping the Argos were going to pick up Matthew Schultz. Honestly, I think he was kind of weirdly a very coveted guy in this free agent period, honestly. I think that's why his market moved very quickly. Hamilton, they've seen the last couple of years the value of having that backup quarterback. And I think he was very high up on a lot of guys' teams' list because he's not a guy that you're going to sign and expect to start. He's a guy that you're going to sign and he's not going to be threatening to the starting quarterback. I thought he would have been a good fit in BC, actually. But ultimately, Hamilton gets him. And I think that was a really good signing. I was happy to see that as a Tiger Cats fan. Sorry I'm late. I may have missed your answer for this if anyone's asked. What do you think are the Tiger Cats' biggest needs in free agency or the draft? I think that left tackle is a major issue for this team still. They have some option there that like Travis Vorncrawl, who was he was a like American free agent signing last year, rookie free agent signing last year, but unproven option to say the least. But the issue with that is, that there's just not many good offensive linemen available across the league right now. It's a really big supply and demand issue. And, I think left tackle is a major issue. Defensive end is a major red flag right now for me, if you're the Tiger Cats, honestly, because they lose Ja'Garrett Davis. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with these interior defensive linemen, if they're going to play Dylan Wynn more out at defensive end. I think he has some of the versatility to do that, but it's going to be interesting to see. I think it's possible they start Mason Bennett, their first-round pick from 2020, Canadian guy, at defensive end, and that's one of their guys. But I think it would be great if they could add, a Sean Lemon or something like that to the defensive end core there. And then I think a lot of the guys on the defensive end, the defensive backfield, guys like Jamal Roll and apparently Deontay Evans, there was a report that he had re-signed, but it wasn't officially re-signed on the CFL transaction page. So some guys that just need to be re-signed in the secondary of the Tiger Cats, but I would say those are their main needs. They take care of us. We take the cup in Regina. Sorry, Jason, just got in here. What's your thoughts on what will happen with Andrew Harris? Also, any news on star defensive lineman Sean Oakman out of Toronto? I'll answer Oakman first. I think Oakman's actually under contract for next year. I believe so because It's when American players or whatever players like enter the league, they get signed to a one year plus a team option contract. Essentially a 2-year contract unless they're just bad and they cut them. So I think Oakman is under contract for next year. But in terms of Andrew Harris, I was saying that maybe BC makes the most sense because they just have nothing really there at running back, and they just had very disappointing performances that last year at running back. So and there have been reports that they want to flip that into a Canadian position. So I think a reunion in BC makes the most sense, in my opinion, for Andrew Harris. What is your pick for the East standings? I actually just went over this a little bit, but I would say the East is ridiculously close to pick right now. I think a lot of it's going to be sorted out by like the rest of the signings and what they do in terms of the depth and everything like that. I still need to look at the film and stuff in this past season a little more clearly to see how a lot of these say like offensive linemen and stuff like that. That's where I get a lot of insights from actually like watching the games and taking them in depth. So to see how much these teams have really improved and added like key pieces in the season. But I had in terms of the East standings, and this is just, I really could see any team finishing first or any team finishing last. It's that close right now. I said Montreal first, Hamilton second, Ottawa third, and Toronto fourth. But the reason why I had Toronto fourth was just because I think they do have the worst quarterback out of the four right now with Ottawa adding Mazzoli. But I think Toronto does have some difference makers on that roster. I think that defense is going to be really good next season. What about David Watford? He's a quality backup. Yeah, no, I think he'll get signed somewhere. I think absolutely. If Dominic Davis can get a job, he got the backup job at Montreal, I think David Watford will obviously have a market. I think potentially Saskatchewan is a good fit. I think he spent some time there previously, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm not getting that confused with some other team. But really interesting to see what happens with Watford. What happened to Jake Burt? Yeah, I think he got injured early in the season. He just really never got a chance to see much time in the lineup. I think he's in for a much bigger role this year with Nikola Kalinic off to the NFL. They're kind of the same kind of player type, that fullback tight end style guy. So we'll see him on the field, I think, this year. But the Tiger Cats not looking good in terms of, a few years ago drafting the guy number 1 overall, wide receiver that never showed up. And then number 1 overall last year, Jake Burt, and he didn't really play at all last year. So we'll see if he has a better success and is more noticeable in year 2. Do you know if the Ticats even made an offer to Jagarrett? I was really surprised at them letting him walk away. Yeah, I really have no no information on that. But yeah, I would be surprised if they didn't try to keep him. But it's like I think that the Ticats right now this offseason, they're at a point that they're trying to restructure this roster. I think a lot in terms of their what they're paying, what they're allocating to certain positions. I think you saw that with letting Brandon Banks go as well. So I don't know what's going on with Hamilton. I would have broken the bank to keep Jagarrett Davis if there was one guy on this team I would broke the bank to pay, because I think he's the most important player. But in terms of like if they offered him a contract, I'm not completely sure. Jackson Bennett was a huge loss for the Cats. Having a jackknife Canadian player in the CFL is an asset. Ratio breaker. Yeah, he's a good player. Like he, he's capable of actually being like getting in there and, actually like carrying the ball on occasion. And he's an excellent special teams guy. So, it's good to have as many of those players as possible in the CFL. And I think he'll do well in Ottawa. And I think it's kind of natural that he goes back to Ottawa because I believe that's where he played in university. Thanks for the answer, Jason. Love the videos. Thanks, Rudy. I really appreciate that, man. We need more CFL live streams. Honestly, I'm planning to do this for the draft this year. I was planning to do it last year, but it just didn't work out. Apparently, you have to like verify your channel like 24 hours in advance. And I didn't think to do that, for live streaming last year for the draft. So that's why I couldn't do it. But I'm planning to do that this year and, potentially do this for, maybe the season opener or something like that, maybe a Labor Day game or something like that. I think someone asked, how many CFL games have I been to? I think I missed it. But I've been to. I was a season ticket holder this year, so like I've been to. Went to like 8 or 9 games this year because I also went to a game in Toronto to see the Argos versus the Tiger Cats. So those are the games I've been to. But my goal is in the next 5-6 years at least to go to every stadium around the CFL because that's really a goal of mine. I was gonna try to go to Regina next year for the Grey Cup, but a lot of it's going to depend on whether or not I can find an accommodation in Regina. A lot of the hotels already booked up for that. So, we'll play it by ear for that. But, want to go see as many CFL games as possible, honestly, in person. Love it. When the season starts up again, you should stream a few Tiger Cats game. Absolutely, Stamps fan. I will. I will definitely stream, especially some of those road games. Obviously, for the home games, I'll probably be at the game themselves. But I'm planning to actually, like stream during games this year, and just obviously I can't like show the actual footage like for copyright reasons, but we can hang out, react to all the games together. I would love to do that with you guys. Road trip to where do you think Trey Ford will go in the CFL draft? Now this is an interesting player, and I really haven't done much work on the draft for this year. I don't watch too many U Sports games because I'm usually too busy doing this, or I watch a lot of NFL as well. But Trey Ford, I'm very well aware of. He played with my my buddy Tyler Ternowski at Waterloo, and he was an absolute stud at quarterback and just quite the athlete. And he's going to be a really interesting guy to see where he goes in the CFL draft. I'm trying to think like, it really depends on what team's like vision for him is. Do they view him as an actual quarterback, or are they going to try to convert him into like a receiver or something like that? Because he has the athleticism to play basically anywhere on the offensive side. So, in terms of guys that I think Edmonton's really looking at those kind of guys recently. Obviously, Chris Jones has played guys on receiver and played them at DB before and things like that, and likes to move guys around and versatile guys. Look at the quarterback room they're building right now with JT Barrett, Taylor Cornelius. Obviously Nick Marbuckle is kind of the outlier in this, but you have like all these guys that have athleticism in that quarterback room. I think Dakota Prukop was there too. But I think Trey Ford would be interesting with Edmonton as a fit. Road trip to Ottawa, yeah, absolutely. I would love to go to the nation's capital. I went there just before, the pandemic. Obviously, not to go to a Redblacks game, but I love Ottawa. Honestly, one of the best cities I've been to. In your own opinion, who has had the best offseason in the league on paper so far? I'd pick Ottawa on paper as a Bombers fan. Yes, okay, like it's definitely Ottawa, but I would say that Ottawa also had such a blank slate. Like they basically had nobody that they really wanted. Like if you actually looked at the re-signings, there wasn't many guys that they re-signed because they wanted to turn over a lot of this roster, and they've been very effective at it, and they brought in a lot of guys. So like I think in terms of like actually acquiring guys, it's definitely Ottawa in terms of the best offseason so far. But I think I really like what Winnipeg's done, just being able to retain almost all of those guys, all those core guys. And I gotta, I also want to tell you guys, I'm actually gonna be going to Arizona in a few weeks, so I'll be gone for a week. But I am going to pre-record a couple videos, and one of those videos is gonna be on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So, just so you guys have some content on the channel for that. I think Winnipeg has done a really good job retaining a lot of guys. And I actually really like what Calgary's done as well. So I think those two teams are, on paper, probably the two best teams in the CFL going into next season if it was going to do an early preview. Thanks for doing this. Yeah, man. No problem, Michael. I love doing this, man. It's But my first time ever, and first hour's just flown by here, guys. Really appreciate everybody for tuning in. I picked the Bombers. They re-signed a good chunk of the roster. Absolutely. Thoughts on Trevor Harris with including the playoff game this year? Yeah, so Trevor Harris, this has always been the thing. He'll have the really highs and the really lows in terms of his game-to-game performance. And we really saw that this year. When you actually look at probably the best quarterback to game of this entire season was his Labor Day performance against Edmonton, against Calgary, where it was like 400 yards and 4 touchdowns or something like that. Just, basically a flawless performance. But then he has some really dreadful performances. Obviously, the playoff game. And I think the playoff game against Hamilton, they moved the ball well enough to win. It was just the damn turnovers that were killing them. And it also really couldn't get William Stanback going in that game as well. I think that played a huge role for Montreal. Really important for the pacing of their offense. But Harris, I think he could still play. Like, I honestly am not as low on him as other people. I think he's still, if I was doing a quarterback ranking, I think I would still have him like 7th or something like that in the CFL. I think the top 6 guys are pretty solid, but I think you could argue with Trevor Harris, McLeod Bethel-Thompson, and then you got guys that are unproven like Nathan Mork and to a certain degree Nick Arbuckle. So I think those guys are all, that's kind of where I see Trevor Harris in like the hierarchy right now in the quarterback situation in the CFL. I'm in a note, Jason. Thanks for this. Peace out, bro. Honestly, man, thanks for joining me. Honestly, it's been great. All right, let's get a few updates here. Defensive back Jamal Roll will re-sign with the Tiger Cats. Man, this is a huge signing for the Tiger Cats, honestly. I actually have this. Someone gave me this for my birthday. It's a button. Touchdown! There we go. When the Tiger Cats make a signing, I'll do that. Jamal Roll, I think that's a huge signing for the Tiger Cats. He, at the cornerback position, did a really good job replacing Delvin Breaux when he quote unquote retired for that one this past season. So I think that's a huge re-sign for the Tiger Cats. And like I was saying a few minutes ago, they got a few of these defensive back guys to bring back, and Roll was one of those key guys. And speaking of Delvin Breaux, I'm really interested to see where he ends up today, honestly, because or if he signs today, because being off for a year, but previously obviously one of the best players in the entire CFL. So it'll be interesting to see if he's back in Hamilton or he goes elsewhere. All right, it's official. Mark Cordy is going to the Edmonton Elks from the Ottawa Redblacks. Sucks for Ottawa to lose their best offensive lineman, but with the upgrades that they made, bringing in a Convery Williams, Hunter Stewart, other Darius Sirocco, those kind of guys, they'll be okay, I think. But obviously a huge gain for Edmonton, who I thought had a great offensive line going into last year, but I think they really, really underperformed. And they bring in a guy like Cordy that can play center, he can play tackle, he can get moved around a lot on that offensive line and be pretty effective at multiple spots. So I think this is a really good fit. And he comes back home to where he played university ball. Do you think Hamilton will be do you think Hamilton will be the same team next year, or are they going to take a step back without Speedy Banks? I think they will take a slight step back. I still think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they have enough of that nucleus there. And I do believe that Dane Evans, I do believe in Dane Evans as a quarterback. So I think, they'll have enough to stay afloat. They got Braylon Addison still at receiver, Stephen Dunbar, Tim White, some young guys emerging. So I think they'll be okay in terms of replacing Speedy B. But as I said before, I don't think that defense has that same fear factor now that Jagarrett Davis is going to be signing in Toronto, and they missed that elite pass rush presence that a lot of these great teams in the CFL have right now in 2022. Do you think Harris would take a backup salary to sign somewhere with heavy, intensive bonuses, or is his his mindset, I'm a top tier QB ego, going to cause him to hold out and wait for an injury to sign somewhere? I think that's the debate, and I think that's what I think I saw Farhan Lalji of TSN report say that last night. It's like he basically has a couple options: sign quickly as a backup for a lot less money, or wait and see what what can happen. But honestly, if I were him, I've made quite a bit of money the last few years in the CFL, relatively speaking, to a lot of other players in the league. I'm signing on, pretty fast for a lower salary, because then I get to know the playbook and everything like that. Signing mid-season like he did with Montreal last year, and he played pretty well considering in a few games. But that is really freaking hard to do in football, is to jump in mid-season and actually play well, right, as a quarterback especially. So I would sign quickly if I was Trevor Harris, but honestly, I have no idea what he's going to do. Have you been to Ivor Wynn? Yeah, I was. I went. I went to Ivor Wynn many times as a kid. I have a funny story actually. To be honest, I was not a fan of Ivor Wynn really at all. Like, I understand the nostalgia about it and everything like that, but when I remember the Ivor Wynn, I remember the Tiger Cats being bad. I remember the Tiger Cats being like all those horrible years, like the gold jerseys and all these horrible years to the Tiger Cats. And I remember one time as a kid, there was a freaking and then most of the seats there were like benches, right? And there were like freaking like nails sticking out. There was a nail sticking out of the bench, and I like cut my thumb open. It was awful. It was awful, and I still have a little you won't be able to see it, but it's on my thumb here. A little scar from when I was a kid. So yeah, no, it's Ivor Wynn. I understand the nostalgia, and a lot of people probably had a lot of great memories. But for me personally, as a Tiger Cats fan, not as good memories there. And I love Tim Hortons Field since it's been there, since it's been in operation there. Looking for Jacob Ruby to have a huge year in Ottawa after what happened with him last season as well. Yes, I think Jacob Ruby was a really smart addition for Ottawa. Just a really solid, starting caliber guard in the CFL. Liked his tape in 2019 with when he was with Edmonton. So I think he'll be a very much needed upgrade to that interior offensive line. You almost forgot they got him with who else they brought in this offseason, but I think he's a really good fit, and that offensive line will be so much better than it was this past year. Okay. Let's get to open the 3 Down Nation tracker here. Apparently, cornerback Mike Jones from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers is going to the Montreal Alouettes. I think that's a solid addition, honestly. And Mike Jones, more of that physical kind of defensive back. Sometimes he gets beat a little bit in coverage, but he's a really good tackler from that defensive back spot. Doesn't really give up a lot of yards after the catch. So I think that's a good fit there. I mean, I think Money Hunter, who had a great season last year for Montreal, he's still a free agent. I believe he's gotten a few NFL workouts, so he's probably still waiting on that. He may not sign today, so I think it's good for Montreal to add a little bit to that defensive back room in the meantime. Honestly, TSN should hire you for CFL and TSN, man. That's honestly a dream job. Though that kind of a position would be a dream job, and I love doing this. I honestly do, and I would never want to really give up this YouTube gig, but obviously being part of TSN and all what they do, and I think a lot of people will say that TSN has had a negative impact. Like some people complain what TSN does in terms of their in terms of the value that they add and like the lack of promotion and stuff like that. But I think when I go back and I watch old CFL games on like CBC and stuff like that, the production value was so much better when it moved to TSN, honestly. And And I think they've done a lot of help for the league. And honestly, I would love to work for TSN. Honestly. Hey Hussey, who do you see? Who are you picking for the 2022 Grey Cup? Honestly, well, Winnipeg to repeat. Honestly, I think it's either that or Calgary. I think those two teams are going. It's going to be a dogfight between those teams, and I think in the East they're going to be a really interesting battle to see who comes out on top and makes it to the Grey Cup. But ultimately, I think the two best teams on paper right now for next year are in the West with Calgary and Winnipeg. Top 5 wide receivers. Well, that's pretty easy for me because I actually did a video on this not too long ago. So I had Reggie Bagleton at number 1, Brian Burnham of the BC Lions at number 2, Eugene Lewis of Montreal Alouettes at number 3, Lucky Whitehead of the BC Lions at number 4, and Kenny Lawler of the now Edmonton Elks at number 5. So those are my top 5. But I did a top 15. So if anybody wanted to watch, check that out. It's on the channel. Boo! I guess we got a Tiger Cats fan or some other team's fan out in there for my Alexandra. I guess I could talk about my. Do you think Brandon Banks is overrated? No, Brandon Banks has had an outstanding career. He's a future CFL Hall of Famer. He did, obviously his 2019 season was absolutely incredible. And, nobody could ever take what he did that year away from him. And in those a few seasons, like a great 4 or 5 year run as a receiver, honestly. But, I think I understand why the Tiger Cats moved on. And, I think it'll be interesting to see where Banks goes. Maybe he does go to Ottawa, follows Mazzoli, all that. But, I don't think he's overrated in the slightest. He had a bad season last year with injuries and stuff. He's older. It's to be expected that there might be a little bit of a decline there. So, no, I don't think he's overrated at all. Should they bring back Touchdown Atlantic? Yeah, no, I think I think it was a great initiative, and I would actually love to go to a game out there when that's going on. But yeah, I'll be interested to see what they bring back. Obviously, I think last year and the last couple of years, it's like COVID related stuff with trying to minimize like they just won't do as many extra things like that. But I think they'll bring that back in the next couple of years. Rudy, you're an Addison guy. I love the jersey. I honestly thought he was going to stick in the NFL. Me too, honestly. I'd take him over Banks any day. I got my signed Darvin Adams jersey on my wall. Sadly, not going to be worn anymore. Good thing I got Jeff Coat jersey as well. Honestly, that's always the tricky thing with buying CFL jerseys, right? And that's kind of how, I love, there were a lot of guys that I was considering buying a jersey for. For like when I bought this jersey just a few months ago. But like I had I was looking at guys that were already under contract at that time because I bought it around Christmas time, and there were only maybe 10 players that were under contract for next year. And I wanted another guy. I was considering taking the leap of faith that he was going to re-sign, and he ultimately ended up re-signing was Tunde Adeleke. I thought that would have been a really cool jersey as well, but I went with Addison just because he was already under contract for next year. And I think, I think I'm with you. I would take him over Brandon Banks. I think, having Addison out of the lineup this year really did hurt Brandon Banks because Addison has a lot more of that well-rounded, versatile skill set, in my opinion. And in those couple games that he played this year, he was the best receiver on the Tiger Cats. So you actually look at that last game that he got injured in that ended his season against Ottawa. He had 100 yards in the first quarter. So he probably would have went for 200 that day. So I think Addison is a great receiver, and I'm really excited to see if he can reestablish himself as one of the league's best this year. Yeah, Jackson Jeffcoat jersey would be pretty sick to have, honestly. I think Jeffcoat, he gets kind of overshadowed by Jefferson, but he's a fantastic player, and I'll probably have to do a top like 10, 15. I don't even know. Like sometimes I did a top 15 for wide receivers because like the depth of wide receiver in the league right now is just absurd. But I'll have to do like a top 10, top 15, whatever it is for a defensive line soon enough because there's just so much talent on the defensive line in the CFL right now. What Stamps merch do you have? I only have one thing, but I'm wearing it underneath this. Just have this shirt, but I'm always looking to add new additions to my merchandise collection. Mostly I have Tire Cat stuff because it's the easiest thing to buy around here. You just don't see a lot of stuff, but a lot of this stuff I got from Sport Check. Like a lot of these hats and stuff, and that's when I was originally setting up my set for the channel. I really like this Rough Riders 2 here. But in terms of stamp stuff, this is all I have as of right now. But I would love I'd love to have a jersey for every team eventually. But obviously they're pretty expensive, right? Look at it this way: you get to buy a new jersey each season. Yeah, no, for sure. I think it would be that is my plan, and like I might have to. I'm undecided what team. I don't think I'm gonna get a Tire Cats jersey next year. I'm gonna get another team. I was just saying maybe if I go to the Grey Cup, I'll get a Riders jersey or something like that. But one player I really would love to have a jersey is Vernon Adams of the Montreal Alouettes. I would love an Alouettes Vernon Adams jersey. Honestly, just really like that guy. Who's the best receiving core in the CFL? And this is a really good question because like there's a lot of good ones right now in the league, but that's really freaking tough. Like I was saying before, if you can have Shaq Evans come back to the level that he played in 2019, I think that's arguably the best one in the whole league there in Saskatchewan. But a lot of these teams, they have those 1-2 punch. And there's not a lot of that, not a lot of depth, at least on paper right now, in terms of guys that have re-signed. Calgary has a really good 1-2 punch with Bagleton and Kamar Jordan. I think that's as good as any in the league. I think Bagleton, as I mentioned before, one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the league in terms of all-around skill set. BC has a really good, duo there. I think those are the teams. Montreal, obviously, Weineke and Eugene Lewis this past season. But I think all those teams. But I think if Saskatchewan can get more Duke Williams and Shaq Evans all playing at the same level, I think that's I think that's arguably the best unit in the league. Especially the fact that you also get have some Canadian talent there with like Mitchell Picton and stuff like that, players like that. Nice. I'm looking to have a Henry Burris jersey. Oh, I love Henry Burris. Who can ever hate Henry Burris? They're just the most. Funny enough, years ago when he played for the Tire Cats, I think I was dropping my grandma off at the airport, and we just ran into Henry Burris there. So it's just that's just the stuff you love about the CFL. That's just how down to earth those guys are, right? Yeah, Stamps Henry Burris jersey. I think that's kind of the team. Obviously he's a legend with Ottawa too because of bringing him the franchise the first Grey Cup. But I always kind of associate Henry Burris with Calgary more so. Obviously he had a couple really great years here in Hamilton as well. I think I'm going to buy a Redblacks Adams jersey. Getting to be past his best before date, but in Adam's honor, you're right about Jeffcoat being overshadowed. My girlfriend has the Jefferson jersey. Yeah, no, like Darvin Adams, I don't think he's one of the best. And he honestly, full disclosure, he did not make my top 15 wide receivers list. He was close. But he's just really, 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 really solid receiver. And, kind of goes under the radar the last few years, because they've had other guys emerge there in Winnipeg. And, just a really likable guy, just does his job, and, you never really hear too much from him, right? As a Tiger Cats fan, I am not sold on Schultz as the backup for Dane. I would love to see the team grab Arbuckle if he gets cut from the Elks. Price might be an issue. Thoughts? Yeah, no, I think Arbuckle will be very, very sought after if he's ever cut loose by the Elks. I think he's really interesting. He's a guy that everybody would love to have as their backup, but I don't think it's getting to the point that he's getting, the rumors and how much they were, going after Jeremiah Mazzoli. I think it's getting to the point that these teams are kind of viewing him as kind of a low ceiling kind of starter, and these teams are not really believing in him to be that guy. You saw how Toronto moved on from him relatively quickly as well. So, I think in terms of backup, everybody would love to have him, but I think Hamilton. It would be interesting to see if Hamilton would throw their hat in the ring for him. If that's the case, if Edmonton would cut him loose. They also signed Jamie Newman from he was a really big star college quarterback at Wake Forest, and I believe he was a transfer to Georgia for 2020, and then I think he opted out for the COVID opt out or whatever, right? So, and that really killed his draft stock, but he's an interesting piece that they just added to that quarterback room. So we'll see how he adjusts and learns the CFL game. Yeah, Henry Burris, Rudy, man, he had it all, and he did it in such a charismatic way. Nobody disliked this guy at all. He was always having fun on the field. Hearing. Right. So Ed Gainey officially signing with Edmonton. Edmonton, I'm not too sure how I'm going to feel about their quarterback situation this year, going into the season, or their offense in general. It's just some interesting pieces, but I think their defense is going to be really good. Chris Jones knows how to coach defense, and I think that side of the ball is going to be very good for Edmonton next year. And one guy to watch, I'm just reading this tweet that says Matt Nichols is looking at options in and out of football, whether he's going to retire or keep playing. I think he's an interesting guy that people kind of forget is out there. I think with Winnipeg, you saw how bad Sean McGuire was in that one start this past season. And I think, I don't think it's too far-fetched if, that Winnipeg could potentially bring back Nichols as a cheap backup if he's willing to come back at that rate. I just thought of that this morning when I was looking at the free agent lists. And apparently they're saying Sean McGuire is exploring options outside of football to potentially move on with life and retire from football. So we'll see what happens with both Nichols and McGuire. Alex, what should the CFL do to attract a younger audience? Isn't that the great question, right? I think what I'll say about it is I don't think it's a catch. I don't think it's just this one thing you can change, and I think everything has to kind of be integrated, and I think you have to make multiple changes. Like I said, I think in other videos, I don't think you need to make fundamental changes to the rules of the game, because I think the game is great. But I think there's things that you could do to make it better. I think getting the ball spotted quicker between snaps, because we have this perception that it's a 20-second play clock, right? And that is true inside of 3 minutes. But say first down, you run the ball, and this is the first 57 minutes of the game. You run the ball, and then you you get tackled, and then but the play clock does not start right. The game clock is running, but the play clock hasn't started yet. And I get that it's unrealistic to get the guy set up right away, right? But I feel like the clock should almost be stopped for a few seconds until that ball is spotted in place. You got a lot because the possessions really aren't. It really isn't a 20-second play clock. It's really almost like a 30-second play clock. The way how long it takes for this ball to get in place by the referees a lot of the time. So that's one thing that kind of pisses me off. Maybe running the clock on converts. I'm not a huge fan of that either. So I think there's some procedural stuff that they could look at and to tweaking. But in terms of creating new fans, I think like a lot of people say, a lot of it's marketing issues. Actually, and they need a significant investment into new technology and ways to reach new audiences. Hopefully, this partnership with Genius Sports that they they announced during Grey Cup week can help them discover ways to reach that younger demographic and grow the league fan base as a result. I'm sitting on this live feed until you announce Andrew Harris to Saskatchewan. Honestly, I'm really excited for Andrew Harris just to see if because I don't think he's retiring. I think he's going to come forward and still wants to get to that 10,000 yard rushing plateau. And wouldn't that be pretty internet breaking if he goes to Saskatchewan? I saw a guy did a really good job photoshopping it, and like almost looked like an official thing that Andrew Harris is going to Saskatchewan, like into the Photoshop the jersey and everything, and everybody was just freaking out at him. It's like it was hilarious, but really excited to see where Andrew Harris ends up for sure. I would kind of like to see Trevor Harris to the Stamps as a backup. It could make a great quarterback tandem. The Stamps is one thing I really don't see it happening, just because you got Jake Mayer there, who looked really, really promising in those few starts that he got this season, and as a true rookie in the CFL, which doesn't happen all that often. So I think Calgary's set, and I don't think that's going to be a team that's going to be looking for Trevor Harris, honestly. Back. Hamilton and Ottawa do a great job of connecting to the younger audience. Yeah, I think those are two of the better social media, presences in the league. I think Toronto's, for as much flack as they get, I think their social media, presence is pretty good. I'm going to be doing, I've been thinking about doing a video about, comparing the social media, things like all the CFL's YouTube channels for all the teams and everything like that, how much followings they get, compare them, and what they usually get on videos and stuff like that. So I thought that would be an interesting video at some point when the news cycle kind of slows down here this offseason. But it'll be interesting to look at, I think. Honestly, I'd see Harris in Winnipeg if he wants. Trevor Harris, yeah. Oh, yeah. I think Winnipeg. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that backup role. Knock on wood, but Zach Collaros has been an injury-prone guy throughout his career. Last year, obviously, had very good success and luck in terms of staying healthy. I think that offensive line has a big part of to deal with that. But I think they do need to add some assurance, because what we saw from that quarterback position the last couple of games of the year were, when Collaros wasn't in the lineup, it was not the greatest, but obviously they had some backups in there as well. Rudy, I actually got the chance to talk to him at the start of January, and he told me it would be a great opportunity, but he doesn't see it working with Zach already there. He told me he believes he is still a top-tier quarterback in the league and thinks he can be a starter somewhere. Yeah. No, I can't say I blame him, man. He's I think 2019 he played pretty well. Like he missed some games, but I think he played pretty well. And this year, like that the eye test was pretty ugly, but actually in terms of from a statistical standpoint, he looked all right. I definitely think he could bounce back somewhere else if he was given a starting opportunity, though. Should wear the Tiger Cats hat? I guess I could. It looks. The button.
This time, it's personal.
It's funny with this thing. It doesn't like. I think my dad was saying he got this off at Amazon or whatever. It only says like it has like 5 sayings, but like only like one of them is actually like Tiger Cats related.
Go hard or go home. Let's go, boys.
Winners train, losers complain.
Attitude is everything, dude. You gotta believe. Let's go, Tiger Cats.
And that's the one thing that I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it only says "Let's go Tiger Cats," and that's the only thing it's like. You'd think it would say like "Oski Wee Wee" or something like that on it, but. Are you going to the 2022 Grey Cup? It all depends on what if I can find an accommodation, like an Airbnb or something like that in Saskatchewan for that week. But it's booking up fast, and I've been looking at. I looked into all the hotels and stuff already. Everything's already like sold out pretty much. So, going to be really interesting to see if I can go. But I would love to, honestly. Maybe if not the Grey Cup, maybe I can go out there for a game. Or out west for a couple games next year. All right. Let's see if we got any. Three. It's crazy. It was freaking like busy at like 10 a.m. this morning. A lot of these signings leaking out, and then it's just like everything's kind of going to a halt now. Once the thing officially opened. Three down nation. Yeah, not much going on right now. Who should the Redblacks get at the draft? Like if all else fails, I think I think getting adding to the offensive line is always just a smart strategy in the CFL draft. I think that's usually the teams when you look back the best teams they've added consistently. Like this team right here, Calgary's always done an excellent job adding offensive linemen through the draft. So, and Winnipeg in recent years as well. So, I think Ottawa, as good as they've done in terms of addressing the offensive line, I think they could still afford to get some younger pieces in there to develop in the early rounds of the draft this year. But like I said, I haven't really done. I'm going to be doing, more of like an overview of the draft prospects and stuff pretty soon on the channel. Once the free agency kind of slows down and everything like that. So we'll take a look deeper into draft needs and what potential players could be a fit for each team. All right, guys, I'm going to take a look at this top 10. You guys can't see it very well, I'm sure, but I'll point to it here. So Ja'Gared Davis was my number one free agent when I made a list last night. He's reportedly signing with the Toronto Argonauts. That is a gigantic signing, honestly. Getting one of the true difference-making pass rushers in the game, I think, obviously speaks for itself. Number 2, I had Derek Moncrief, strong side linebacker of the Edmonton Elks, signing back to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I think, again, like Davis, he's one of the best players at his position. I think that strong side linebacker role is super important in today's league. Just having that ability to play coverage on that wide side of the field is going to be really crucial to see. I think that's a really crucial addition, especially with they bring in Sankey as well, who I'll talk about more in a second. One of these guys that's still out there was my number 3 guy, is that safety Brandon Alexander of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I haven't seen anything yet about him agreeing to a contract with Winnipeg or anybody else, but I think he was one of the best players on Winnipeg last year, and that's saying something given the year that they had. But I think he's really a tone setter for that defense. Kind of like if anybody in here watching the NFL, anyone remember Cam Chancellor for the Seattle Seahawks? Kind of reminds me of him. This just big physical safety jumping in here and really striking fear into receivers over the middle of the field. And so I think he's going to be a really big addition to whoever signs him. But like I said, he's still unsigned as of yet. Number 4, linebacker Darnell Sankey of the Calgary Stampeders, as I said earlier in the stream, signing with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So 2 of the top 4 here going to the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And then at number 5, offensive lineman Mark Cordy going to the Edmonton Elks from the Ottawa Redblacks. Just the super versatile young offensive lineman that really was the lone bright spot on that team on the offensive line side of things last year. Defensive tackle Steven Richardson, really impactful defensive tackle down the stretch last season. Didn't play as much in 2019, and then really emerged down the stretch and was really a dominant force in the Grey Cup in particular for Winnipeg. Apparently, there's been links that he's going to sign with BC, but I'm not completely sure. It's not completely confirmed, so I haven't put it up on the board there. At number 7, I had Greg Ellingson, wide receiver. He is going to be signing he has signed with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. A really great addition, just one of the most consistent receivers in the league, and really doesn't get enough love when you talk about the best receivers in the CFL over the last handful of years. So I think that's a really good signing for Winnipeg. And then defensive back at number 8, Deshaun Amos of the Calgary Stampeders. Apparently he's going to Toronto, and this joins a lot of other former Calgary Stampeders in Toronto. It's basically come Calgary East, and I think Amos is just a really, really good defensive back. One of a number of defensive backs. They could have put in a lot of other defensive backs as well up here, but Amos really stood out to me this year. But I got a whole list of free agents over here that a lot of them are defensive backs that are still available, but Amos going to Toronto. And at number 9, running back Andrew Harris. As mentioned, we've discussed it a lot on this live stream. Don't know where he's going to go, but it's going to be really interesting to see, regardless if he's officially leaving Winnipeg or not. And then at number 10, Sean Lemon, defensive end. Just quietly very consistent pass rushers every year. It's weird. Like it doesn't seem like he's that prominent in terms of one of the best pass rushers in the league. But every year you look up at the stat sheet, this guy has like 8 or 9 sacks and sometimes double-digit sacks. So I think he's the most proven pass rusher left on the market now that Ja'Gared Davis is gone. And I think a team like maybe Hamilton or any team that's really looking for to upgrade that pass rush situation, I think could take a look at Sean Lemon. But that's just the top 10 that I put together last night, and a lot of it was rendered mute by the time the stream started. But I just wanted to have some kind of visual for you guys. I know you probably couldn't read it anyway, but so I apologize for that, guys. But that's just my top 10 that I put together. Do you think Charleston Hughes could help a team? I think it's kind of probably a training camp kind of flyer kind of situation. I think he's a guy that's going to sign. If he signs with a team, it's going to be probably after this initial wave, and I think some team could give him a chance, but given his age, he's just not going to be a priority for any team right now. But I think he could help out on a rotational basis for some team, especially a team that I'm trying to think of a team that could use him. I mean, maybe Edmonton, because they like old guys over there with the Adarius Bowman and Manny Arsenault signing. So maybe Edmonton. I'm really not ruling out anything that Edmonton does this offseason with kind of the makeover that they're trying to have of that roster. Oh yeah, I didn't cue into that, Rudy. The thing with Alexander is he was injured in the Grey Cup and won't be available until at least July, maybe August. That's a really good point, and maybe that's what holds maybe that's what holds a lot of teams off from signing him right yet, which could potentially play into the advantage of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, who might just because they know what he brings to that team, how he fits already. But for a new team, they would like to have these new players right at the start of their season so they can start integrating them into their schemes and stuff. So yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I didn't really cue into that. I think I may have read that before, but I totally forgot about that when I was making this list. What inspired you to make a CFL YouTube channel? As someone new to the CFL, I appreciate the content you make. There isn't that much CFL content out there. Yeah, and I think that's exactly why I started it, was because I love all football. Honestly, I love CFL and I love the NFL as well, and I watch a lot of NFL. But I really want to make places because I've always loved YouTube. I've always loved YouTube, and I follow a lot of guys on YouTube, guys like NBA, NHL, NFL, obviously. But there wasn't a lot of CFL content out there on YouTube, and I'm like, I love the CFL. It's close to home. It's close to my heart. Why not, just make daily or weekly content on it? And I just thought there was an opportunity for me there. And I really appreciate everybody that supported me along the way. And that's exactly why I started a channel, because I thought that this is something out there that people could want, and I think there's shown to be a lot of interest in it. Do you think Harris will benefit the Tiger Cats? Is this Andrew Harris or Trevor? Because I think Andrew, because I don't think either are really a fit, to be honest. If it's Andrew Harris, I think that they're really set in the backfield, honestly, because they brought back both the Canadian running backs yesterday, Sean Thomas, Ellingson, and Malik Irons, and then they brought back Don Jackson. Those are going to be their top three in their backfield. I don't think anything's changing in terms of that. Sorry, Paul. Yeah, I don't think Andrew really is a potential fit. Obviously, I think it would be, I still think Andrew Harris, just based on what he showed in the playoffs last year, I think he's still like top 3 running back in this league. It's just like, are you willing to gamble that the wheels might fall off at 35 years old next year, and maybe he's doesn't play half the season again like he did this year? So I think that's the risk with Andrew Harris, and I think a lot of teams are there'll be a few teams that'll be interested in bringing him in, but I think that's the risk with Andrew Harris at this point. Thoughts on the old Mosaic and the Big O? I never went to old Mosaic. Just saw it on TV a bunch of times. Obviously, I think I'm in generally speaking, I'm just a fan of the newer stadiums, honestly. And I like, speaking of experience, just because of the whole Ivor Wynn to Tim Hortons Field transition has just been such an upgrade for I think the fan experience there. But I think there's something that he said about the nostalgia of a lot of these old stadiums. The Big O, assuming you mean in Montreal, I think it's really cool to they've had some Grey Cups there in the past. I remember when the Alouettes were really good at when I was a kid. When Anthony Calvillo, all these guys, throwing the ball over the field. They're just incredible teams. I like. I think it was cool to have games there, and I think Montreal, like I would love to see them get like an actual, stadium for themselves instead of sharing it at McGill. I would personally love that, but I understand how unfeasible a lot of this stuff is from a financial standpoint. So, I think it's cool, like from a special occasion standpoint, to have games at Olympic Stadium. I'd love to see that once in a while. If the Grey Cup comes back to Montreal or something like that. GM Kyle Walters has stated that he expects to have Brandon Alexander back, but he won't be a priority signing with his surgery. Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me, honestly. And like I said, I think other teams will probably be hesitant signing a guy that won't be available till like midway through the season. Do you think the Bombers will be as good as they were last year? No, I don't think they'll ever be as good as they were last year, because last year I think is one of the best CFL teams I've ever seen. They were just so far and away the best team in the CFL all season long, and they really only had one legitimate loss the whole year, and that was to Toronto on a back-to-back scenario where it's really hard to beat the same team back-to-back weeks. And then the other loss they had was to Montreal when they were playing all their backups. So I don't think they'll be as good. I think Kenny Lawler was a great player for them, and at this point in his career, I do think Kenny Lawler is a better player than Greg Ellingson. But I think there's still enough talent there to win that third consecutive Grey Cup. They're right there. Obviously a lot of their veterans are a year older, and I think a lot of it will come down to if Zach Collaros can have another healthy season, which has always been a question with him in the past. But I think they have as good a chance as any as winning the Grey Cup again next year. When do you think Hamilton will? What do you think Hamilton will need to get over the hump? It's hard to say because they're really kind of going in the kind of the opposite direction right now with the I think the Jaguar Davis the loss of Jaguar Davis, but honestly I don't think they've had so many. My buddy Daryl, he always says like they had like so many bites of the apple. They've had so many opportunities with this core of guys like Sonny Lawrence, Brandon Banks. Obviously he's not here anymore, but all these guys that have been part of these teams, those 4 Grey Cup losses, and you're kind of at a loss of what more can you do, right? You almost had a perfect seat, almost a dream season in 2019, and then you were the favorite going into the Grey Cup against Winnipeg that time, and you just had a horrible performance. And I think a lot of it just has to do with I don't know, maybe you just need like a new new players, really. Like you need more of a different nucleus of guys that and I think that's kind of what they're trying to do. They're trying to make this the kind of the next era. Obviously Simone is still there and still like the face of the franchise, but they're going in a different direction, obviously in the receiving core, trying to get younger. I think they still have enough pieces that they'll be in the Grey Cup conversation next year, I believe. But because I think they do have the best quarterback in the East Division. But in terms of like what moves they could do, I think that they'll need to replace Davis or find an adequate pass rusher to put pressure off the edge next year. I think that'll be a necessity given the fact that they lose their most impactful player in Jaguar Davis. So but in terms of getting them over the hump and to winning the Grey Cup, I'm not too sure what else they can really do. As a rural Manitoban, I would 10 out of 10 fly to a Grey Cup game if it was in an Olympic Stadium. Never been to Montreal yet, and would be such a cool experience. Lots of Western fans would make the trip. I agree. I actually have never been to Montreal. Sadly, I've only been to Ottawa, and I've been a handful of I've been to a few places in the States. I've been a lot of Bills games and stuff. I'm a big Bills fan, but That's one of the top places I want to go visit in general, not just like CFL. And I think having a Grey Cup there would, I think it's got to be pretty high on their list of what they would want to, next places that they want to have host a game, right? And I also would love to go see a game in BC, Grey Cup game in BC. I think that stadium is just is awesome. So, those are a couple of those the couple of places I really want to go see big games. Who's the best CFL legend? In terms of guys that I look up to, because like I always try to like when I'm talking about sports, I try not to like judge the guys that I never got a chance to see, right? I always try to put it in the context of the guys that I've actually got to see with my own eyes, because I think for most people it would probably be Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie just so freaking he's just been so he was just so dominant for just like a 5-year period, right? 5 or 6 year period in the CFL. Guys like Warren Moon and stuff like that, and that also brings up another conversation with how I view football players. And I always have this. I usually say, especially when I talk about like the NFL, it's like quarterbacks. I think are best quarterback is like a different discussion than best like player, because I think quarterbacks that kind of have like an disproportionate ability to impact the game. Like it's a different ball game, right? You're touching the ball every play, right? But in terms of like the biggest, when I think of the biggest CFL legend, I think of Anthony Calvillo. That's the first guy that comes to mind for me, because he would just lay the smack down on the Tiger Cats for years, man. He was so freaking good. And obviously the fact that he started his career in Hamilton as well, or didn't start his career, he started with Vegas and then came. It was the start for Hamilton for a while, but just the damage that the guy inflicted on the Tiger Cats as a kid. He's always the guy that I think of in terms of like CFL legends and in terms of CFL quarterbacks. But in terms of like other guys from other position, honestly, Charleston Hughes is right up there for me. Like he is one of the best defensive players I've ever seen. I really like Milt Stegall. He was just incredible. And I just for fun, I was just kind of looking at his like career stats every day, and it's like, it's absurd some of these numbers this guy was putting up every year. It's like 13, 14 touchdowns every season. It's you just don't see that in today's CFL, honestly. And it's those are some of the guys that I think of when I think of legends around the CFL, honestly. What do you think of Ottawa's free agency moves? I love them. I think they've done a really good job, and I said this in a video the other day. They're really attacking their weaknesses. They're admitting, okay, we have a problem. This wasn't what Marcel Desjardins, the old GM, did last offseason when it was like, oh, we're fine. We don't really need to go out there and admit that we have a problem and bring in external guys. They basically just ran back the same crappy roster that they had in 2019. This year, they're really going out and saying, we need to spend the money. We need to turn over this roster, and we need to get some legitimate, proven CFL guys in there. And first of all, you get the quarterback, you get the left tackle, you get a really, really good, solid receiver. I don't know if Ackland's a number one, but he's probably a 2 or 3 in the CFL. And then you got a really good, talented Canadian player in Kwaku Boateng at defensive end. So, I think they've made some really great moves this offseason, and they're going to be a much, much improved team next year. Honestly, like I really think they're right there in the playoff conversation. Wow, it's been 2 hours already on the stream. Rudy. Jason, let me message on Facebook. Yo, that's awesome, Rudy, man. Thank you so much for that. That would be great. Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's already been 2 hours, and not like it's kind of slowed down, like, to be honest. Um, let's see what we got here. Oh, BC Lions signed kicker Sean White. I think that's a huge. BC kind of figured out their kicking issues towards the end of last season, but when you have a chance to upgrade to a guy that's been probably the most consistent kicker over the last handful of years in the CFL, and Sean White, who's also a guy that's from the West Coast, I believe. I think that's a really good pickup for BC there. Little minor addition here. Linebacker slash defensive lineman Toby Antigua signing with the Edmonton Elks. Didn't play a whole lot last year, if I recall, but I think he's shown some versatility. Obviously, playing the linebacker, defensive line. I think he's played some middle linebacker as well. So I think Toby Antigua, another interesting addition there for Edmonton. Just kind of, like I said before, just building up a lot of versatile pieces on this roster. Cool. So let's take a look at some of these guys that are still out there. I think a lot of free agents. Like a lot of the big name guys have been scooped up, but there's a lot of like quality players that are still available right now. And say a guy like Richard Leonard, who's really good defensive back. Wide receiver Hergy Mayala, Canadian guy who had a disappointing season last year. But going into last year, I actually picked him to win most outstanding Canadian last year. One of my worst predictions on the season last year, but I think he still has a lot of potential. And I think he sent a tweet earlier this last week about what you call it, about just like with a bird emoji. And it's like the people are like, oh, he's gonna go home to Montreal, and I think that would be a really good fit, honestly, because Montreal, they have Keon Julian Grant, who did pretty good for them last year in that starting role, but I think Mayala might be a little bit of an upgrade for them at that spot. So I think that might be a really good fit for Mayala and the Alouettes. Quarterback Michael O'Connor have been rumored that they might sign with the BC Lions by the end of the day. And the Canadian duo at quarterback would be really interesting. Another guy here. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, here's a guy that I think now that Comrie Williams off the market and other offensive linemen have now signed, a guy that teams might cycle back on, and I look for maybe Hamilton to throw their hat in the ring for this guy. Riker Matthews of the BC Lions, who basically missed most of last year with concussion issues. But he's a really good tackle. Like, he's a starting caliber tackle at the CFL level. And, obviously there are going to be concerns, like you said, about, health and, where his head's at. But, I think other teams with the limited options on the market, I think a lot of teams will potentially want to take the risk on him. And Hamilton knows this guy very well. He was their left tackle during that great 2019 season that they had. Had a really rough Grey Cup against Willie Jefferson, but who doesn't have that? So I think, Riker Matthews could be a really interesting piece for some team to add, if he signs today. Another guy, Sergio Castillo. Teams always looking for for kickers. Just consistent kickers, especially Winnipeg, until they found him last year, was just dreadful at that kicking position. And then I don't think they win that Grey Cup if they don't have a stellar kicker who made a lot of really good kicks on a really windy day at the Grey Cup last year. So really happy. I'm really interested to see where Castillo lands. Or he might actually just try to stick around and try to find a job in the NFL like he did last season for a bit. But yeah, no, a lot of interesting guys that are still available. like I think a wide receiver that people are that people may teams may look at now that like Greg Ellingson and other guys are off the market is Ricky Collins of the Toronto Argonauts. He was kind of cursed last year in terms of finding the end zone, but did a lot of great stuff after the catch. Really productive receiver, and I think he would be a really solid option for a lot of teams as a third option in a lot of attacks in the league. Like I said, a lot of teams right now have the two what you call it. A lot of teams have only have that 1-2 punch in that receiving core, but like a lot of teams probably looking to add that third legitimate guy, and he could be a really interesting piece there for some team. I don't want the Stamps to have a similar start like last year. That was a real scare. Yeah, I honestly thought, like, especially I went to that game where Calgary was in Hamilton, and I thought Calgary was really gonna like turn the corner on their season that year. I think that game, I think they were 2-4 at the time, but they were playing Hamilton. Hamilton had David Watford starting at quarterback, and I thought this was it. Calgary was really going to get going, but Calgary just couldn't get anything going that day. And he's and Mitchell just really struggled to throw a pick six to Simone Lawrence, and really ugly game, honestly, all around. And they start 2-5, but then miraculously they find a way to get their season going again. And it was really impressive how Calgary really turned it around down the stretch that last year. And then next year, I really do expect them to get off to a much better start, and they'll be one of the better teams in the league. Do you think Brandon Banks will go to the NFL? No, I think that ship has sailed for him. I just think he's too old to he's just too old for the NFL to even give him a look at this point. NFL prefers those younger guys that have the room to grow. A lot of the time, they don't even look at these established CFL guys unless they're like young and they have these breakout seasons. Like they really don't give looks to guys like say like Willie Jefferson or like Jackson Jeffcoat. Those guys that are a little bit older that like are obviously the best players in this league, but they are old. They've already reached their athletic peak, whatever. However they're viewed, even though almost all of these guys could probably play in the NFL at some level. But at Brandon Banks, I really don't see it happening. Maybe actually, watch out, guys. A lot of these guys, some of these guys may actually end up in the, the XFL or USFL or something like that in the next few years. I think that's more likely scenario for Brandon Banks. But I do think Brandon Banks will be in the CFL somewhere next season. We'll put the jersey back on here. So there's not a lot happening, guys. I kind of thought there would be a lot more stuff leaking out. And yeah. I don't know. Can you recap who's a free agent? Yeah, I can kind of give a rundown of the notable guys. Any particular? There's actually in the link of this stream. There's I put a link down for the free agent tracker for the CFL.ca, but I can give you guys a quick rundown who's the notable guys that are still available. pull it up on my computer here. Right. So, some really interesting, some guys for Montreal that are still out there that are interesting. Defensive back Ty Cranston, a Canadian guy that started at safety for them last year. I think Ottawa was rumored to be really interested in him. But I wouldn't be shocked if Montreal tries to bring him back. Wide receiver BJ Cunningham, just a really solid receiver. Not the flashiest guy in the world. Very good intermediate kind of receiver. But I think he would be a good veteran add for a team like maybe Hamilton or something like that to add to the receiving core. I wonder if Montreal is going to be moving on there from him. Taekwon Glass, defensive back, good versatile defensive back, can play halfback, play corner a little bit. Had a really good 2019 with Edmonton. Had a little bit disappointing this year with Montreal. Defensive lineman David Menard. He was the nominee for most outstanding Canadian from the East Division this year. Kind of had a breakout season out of nowhere. He's always been a solid rotational kind of player. You can start him occasionally along the defensive line. But fun fact, he didn't even start a game this year for the Alouettes, but he ended up having like 10 sacks, which was just wild, honestly, especially in a shortened season. So look for him to try to really leverage that to get a big deal here, especially being a Canadian guy as well. And then Michael Wakefield, defensive tackle for the Montreal Alouettes. Interesting. He's been a pretty productive player in the past. For Ottawa, Micah Allway, linebacker, had a pretty good season this past year. Ottawa really doesn't have too many guys that are really completely interesting that haven't signed yet. Nolan McMillan, offensive lineman. I think he's a guy that gets a lot. I think Nolan McMillan he's an offensive lineman for the Redblacks. I think he is probably going elsewhere. I read a report about that. But as to where, I'm not completely sure. There's a lot of teams looking for offensive line help, so I'm sure he has no shortage of suitors, especially being a Canadian guy. And I believe he was their first ever draft pick too in the history of the Redblacks. So he's been a long time guy there. Looks to be moving on from the team though. Guys like quarterback Matt Nichols, the rumor to potentially be retiring or weighing his options there. Antoine Pruneau, defensive back, veteran guy, been there for a long time. But I think his starting days are kind of over, I think. Don Unumba, defensive back / strong side linebacker. Going into last year, I thought he was the best strong side linebacker in the CFL, but I don't know, man. I don't know what the interest level around the league is in him because he kind of took a step back this past season. So we'll see. One of those guys that maybe because of that delayed season, maybe lost a step because just a year older, right? Toronto re-signed almost all their notable guys, but you have a few guys here. Josh Huff, wide receiver, had some decent years. Decent year last year. Although he was cut by Calgary midway through the season, I think to make room for Reggie Bagleton there. But he latched on pretty well with Toronto. Defensive lineman Cordero Law, good edge rusher, good fallback option for a team that's looking for defensive end help. Maybe Hamilton. Again, I'll throw that out there. And then notable guys. Jeff Richards had a good year for them. Defensive back, still unsigned. John White, running back, veteran running back's been around for a while. Interested to see if anybody really views him as a number one running back at this point. But I think has the versatility, can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think he has the ability to be useful. Maybe he goes back to Edmonton or something like that. But that's pretty much it for in terms of interesting free agents that are still left for Toronto. Hamilton has some interesting ones. So a lot of these guys have been scooped up by the Redblacks, but they have Deontay Evans is still reportedly unsigned. There were a report earlier a couple weeks ago that they had re-signed him, but nothing official really about him re-signing with the team. Jamal Roll, he just re-signed with the Terracats earlier today. And then wide receiver David Unger, the Canadian guy, but I think with Lamar Durant coming aboard, and then other guys potentially with Tyler Tarnowski there in the receiving core, I'm unsure if the Ticats are going to bring him back in terms of their Canadian depth at receiver. David Watford, he's going to be moving on. He already said that thank you to Ticats Nation and everything like that. So he's going to be probably a backup somewhere else next season. And then Frankie Williams, really good kick returner / field side corner. Really had a great 2019 season. And then I believe he had a nasty concussion this year. And that's what kept him out a lot of the season. But, if he's on the field, he's one of the better, better and more versatile defensive backs out there. And then Winnipeg, Brandon Alexander, who we talked about earlier. Sergio Castillo, I talked about a minute ago, a kicker. Janarian Grant, great kick returner. Doesn't really provide much on the offensive side of the ball, but a really good kick returner. Deadrick Hansen, probably the most impactful global player since they've been doing this global draft process. Linebacker / defensive end, kind of hybrid guy. Plays great on special teams as well. Kind of just a physical freak. Andrew Harris, obviously, is the big one we're kind of still waiting on. And Josh Johnson, he's a defensive back. I thought had a great 2019 with Edmonton. I think he suffered a season-ending injury pretty early in the season for Winnipeg, if I'm not mistaken, and didn't really get a chance to show out there. But he's a free agent, and I think might be an interesting flyer for a team. I'm surprised this defensive back market hasn't really picked up yet, honestly. Steven Richardson, as I said, up on the board. And then I'll try to run through the other teams real quick here. For Saskatchewan, not too many interesting pieces here. Yeah, Jacob Dearborn, who actually is at the Olympics right now. I believe is he bobsled? I'm not completely sure. If someone fill me in the comments, but Canadian guy and making his country proud over there. Isaac Harker, been a backup there for a few years. Interesting to see if he latches on somewhere. AJ Hendy, defensive back / strong side linebacker. I think he played quite a bit this year, but wasn't really too noticeable. McConnell Henry, defensive tackle, Canadian guy, rumored to be signing with Edmonton, but nothing official I haven't seen yet. The Herdman Reed brothers at linebacker, both Canadian guys as well. I wonder if they're a package deal if they sign somewhere else. They were both together in BC, and then they're both together in they weren't together in BC. Jordan was in BC, but they both signed together last offseason in Saskatchewan. And both these guys really weren't as impactful as I thought they were going to be. They kind of got upstaged by Micah Tights, who had a great season. And then not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. Calgary, Markeith Ambles, wide receiver. Corey Greenwood has had a really tragic career in terms of injuries. Honestly, this guy can never stay healthy, but he's been a starting caliber Canadian ratio breaking, whatever you want to call it, linebacker when he's been in there. Was leading the league in tackles in 2019 before he got injured as well. But again, just guy can't stay healthy. I wonder if it's the end of the road for him. Neela Casatati might be an interesting offensive lineman option at right tackle for a team that might be in need. I think Ottawa still needs a right tackle, so and they're picking up everybody. So we'll see what happens with that. Richard Leonard, I think I mentioned him before. Good defensive back. Yeah, not a whole lot for what you call Calgary either. And then honestly, Edmonton doesn't have many noteworthy guys. I'll just get back to the chat here. Who else do you think the Bombers pick up? For Winnipeg, like what else do they need? I could see them. I don't know. It's really tough to say because they're just really rigging loaded. I think obviously, as Rudy was saying in the chat, that they're probably going to re-sign Brandon Alexander at safety. I think that's a key move that they're still yet to make. And then I think maybe they bring in at one of these DBs, but from another team. I think that's it should be interesting to see if they do add anything big. But I really would assume that they probably spent most of their money by this point in the off season because they had so many key guys to bring back. Right. Got my. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was just a notification about Ted Laurent resigning again. Sean Lemon Hamilton. Yeah, no, it's like I was reading something about how Sean Lemon has played for, I think it was like 7 different CFL teams, and it's like Hamilton's one of the teams he hasn't played for. I forget what that other team is, but wouldn't that be interesting if he's like kind of as a Kevin Glenn career for a defensive end with playing for every team. But again, really productive pass rusher. So like I'm not too sure why there hasn't been as big of a market for him the last few years as there has been, right? Who's dominated the wide receiver position in the past 10 years? In terms of best wide receivers in the past 10 years, I think Banks is right up there with a lot of the best of them. I think the guys like Manny Arsenault could be, is also like I know he just signed with Edmonton, and he's probably not going to make an impact there. But a few years ago, man, he was up there with a lot of the best receivers in the league. Ellingson just been so consistent as well. Doesn't really get the credit, as I mentioned, for being like that. Yeah, no, there's a lot of guys that are that have been very productive as receivers in the CFL, and honestly, I'm probably gonna forget. I'm probably forgetting some guys, honestly, but we'll maybe I'll do a video of like the best like receivers of the 2000s or something like that. Who I forgot to ask, do you know who's actually under contract at quarterback in Ottawa? Last year, it seemed like they signed 15 QBs. Obviously, Mazzoli is there. It's Hodges, Nichols, and under contract. Nichols is not under contract for next year, but Evans and Hodges are because they both were, they signed the rookie contracts last year, before last season. And so they get the 2-year contract, entry-level contract. So they're all SJ Green, man. How did I forget about SJ Green? And while I'm at it, like Jamel Richardson's right up there as well. But I think he's more late 2000s, early 2010s kind of guy. But yeah, SJ Green, he's one of my favorite receivers. I was really hoping he would have continued his career last year, but I understand. He played a long time in the CFL and was really, really good with Toronto as well, like even after his years with Montreal. But yeah, Hodges, Evans are both under contract for next year because of that. It's interesting. Some guys they signed for what would have been the 2020 season that got canceled, and because they didn't freeze the contracts, so it's like that 1 year still ran off every player's contracts. So a lot of these guys became free agents again. But those rookies that signed contracts before the canceled 2020 season they got that 1 year off. They got that 1 year taken off their contract, and then they became free agents this offseason, or scheduled to become free agents this offseason. A guy that comes to mind for me is Steven Dunbar of the Tiger Cats, who they actually had to re-sign because he wasn't under contract for next year. But in comparison, a guy like Tim White was signed, I believe, before this season, so he's under contract for next year, or was under contract for next year already. Yeah, we've been going for quite a while, guys. Honestly, it's it flies by. Thank you guys for keeping me company in all this. Okay, the BC Lions officially signed Luchez Purifoy. I think this is a big loss for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and I think because Purifoy really held solved a lot of their warts, or hit a lot of their warts last season, because he was able to play a lot of different spots. They had a lot of injuries going into last season. Obviously, all those Achilles injuries that they suffered before the season started. But Purifoy was one of those guys that they could move around to so many different spots, play halfback, play safety, play strong side linebacker, just able to play both sides of the field and everything like that too. So losing him and Ed Gainey, I think you lose a lot of identity on the back end of that defense. So that linebacking core is going to be outstanding, obviously with Moncrief and Larry Dean coming back in here, and Mike the Tights, all those guys, Darnell Sankey. But I wonder about the back end of that defense, which I thought was their true strength going into last year. So it'll be interesting to see how Saskatchewan handles the loss of Purifoy next season. And then for the BC Lions, I think, again, I don't think this is it's kind of just adding to a strength if you're the BC Lions, because yeah, maybe they needed a guy to play the strong side linebacker position. And, but I think that their defensive back room was probably their second best position on that roster behind receiver. And, it's kind of I don't know. I think it's just more of adding to a strength rather than attacking the weaknesses that they have on the roster. Apparently, they've been rumored to sign Steven Richardson, defensive tackle, which would be a massive signing for them. But I really need to see those offense and defensive line signings before I would be confident taking BC to be a much better team next year. An interesting thing about Purifoy, he actually began his career in BC, so that's kind of cool. He's going back there, and it's one thing about these shorter term contracts in the CFL is you could lose a guy and then the next year he comes right back to you. So it's really interesting how it works like that. Patrick Levels, I remember he was with Montreal in 2019, and then in the 2020 offseason, and then the 2020 offseason, he signs with Hamilton. But because of that canceled 2020 season, he ends up going to free agency again, and he signed back with Montreal. It's weird. Who could make a surprise playoff appearance? I'm going to say Edmonton. Because I think this team is just – and don't get me wrong, I think it's quite possible that Edmonton falls flat on their face, but – I think, the confidence of, Chris Jones, and you say what you want about Chris Jones, but he can coach football. And I think that defense is going to be very good next year. I think they have the pieces to be very good. He always has a very creative scheme. But if they can just get, because they have a shell of an offense here. They have the skeleton of a potentially pretty good offense. You have a lot of big names there with James Wilder. You have Darrell Walker. You bring in Kenny Lawler, who was the leading receiver in the CFL last season. You got pieces like that. You got Canadian receivers like Tavon Smith. And you also had Mark Cordy on the offensive line. I think Edmonton could surprise some people next season, and have kind of the opposite season that they had last year, where I don't think anybody's really going to be expecting anything of them this year. But last year they were picked by many, including myself, to win the Grey Cup. So that was a pretty bad prediction on my part. But that team looks stacked going into last year. So if I was going to pick a team that I think really you can only pick between really BC or for Edmonton, because I don't think it would really be a surprise if Ottawa makes the playoffs next year, given all these additions that they've had. But I think in terms of a team that could miss it, that could be a shock. I think Toronto, it's possible that they go all the way down to missing it, just because I think they've kind of gotten complacent. I really think they needed to add a quality backup quarterback this offseason. And they may still do that. They may still bring in Trevor Harris or some other guy, right? But and I'm less optimistic about Toronto, even though they did add Jared Davis, who is a true difference maker. I think the quarterback play, it's just so important that having, in my opinion, the worst quarterback in the division could be a big hindrance to them next year. Oh, some details coming here through via Justin Dunk of 3 Down Nation here. Apparently, the Edmonton Elks, with Mark Cordy coming aboard, he becomes the highest paid offensive lineman in the CFL at $210,000 for 2022 and $220,000 for 2023. So, congrats to Cordy for getting that contract, and that's kind of just the reality. You got to pay. If you want to convince guys to leave leave organizations for another organization, a lot of time you gotta incentivize them with extra pay, right? Okay, now it's official. Kenny Lawler is now officially a member of the Edmonton Elks. Just good stuff. Go and get your money, honestly. Especially in a league like the CFL, where it's nothing's really guaranteed. You gotta cash in the short term, and he couldn't say no to the offer that Edmonton put out there for him. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can replicate the success that he had in Winnipeg in Edmonton. But I think for Edmonton, it's you did need a talent infusion in the roster. Will Calgary sign a small cost deal? What do you mean by that? Are you trying to say under the radar free agent or something like that? Because I think the Calgary will definitely be in the market. I don't think Calgary is going to make any big splashes the rest of the way, in terms of this early wave of free agency with the big name free agents that are still available. Because the GM came out and said, Hopnagel came out and said that we really don't have much money to spend because we spent it all on our our core guys that we re-signed. But I think once that initial wave happens and you get all these guys that are you could take flyers on cheaper players, I think Calgary will be very very invested in that in terms of filling out the rest of the rosters, especially with a lot of these defensive backs. And I was saying this early in the stream, it's so many defensive backs are available right now in the CFL right now. So I think it's possible that there's plenty that are going to be left over, and that they could get a bargain deal on somebody. What? So apparently, wide receiver Shaq Johnson is he just tweeted out saying thank you to the BC Lions. So I'm assuming he's signing on with another team. He kind of had a disappointing season this past year, but in 2019 and 2018, I thought he was one of the most underrated receivers in the league, one of the most underutilized guys. Had really high yards per reception, and really made a lot of big plays for the amount of times he was targeted. So I think he's an interesting target for somebody that's needing a Canadian receiver or Canadian receiver depth. Which rivalry should be fun to watch this year? Well, I think especially if it's kind of a cop-out answer, but I think if Andrew Harris goes to Saskatchewan, that's going to be must watch TV with Saskatchewan versus Winnipeg next year. Those are always great games anyway, but that would just add another element to it. I think because of all these signings that Hamilton all these players that Hamilton lost to Ottawa. I think Ottawa and Hamilton games are going to be really good, really fun next year. Jeremiah Mazzoli versus Dane Evans. Okay, who was really better? And I've always been a Dane Evans guy, but it's like, both of these guys can clearly play at the CFL level. So I'm really excited to see what Mazzoli looks like in a different situation and how Dane Evans reacts to the fact that this is his team now and there's nobody looking over his shoulder. Because Matthew Schultz is certainly not going to overtake him for the starting job like Mazzoli could have, right? So I think those are two particular matchups, rivalries that could be really interesting next year. Ooh. I just getting some stretching here, guys. With players not returning to Calgary, will that open up cap space? Well, there's like most of I feel like most of their significant guys got re-signed. Like they didn't really lose too many guys. I mean, they lost to Cumbry Williams to the Ottawa Redblacks. They're like starting left tackle, but they brought in Derek Dennis, who is like former most outstanding offensive lineman guy. Missed last year because of a contract dispute with Edmonton. He was under contract with Edmonton, and then some messy stuff with like the organization and stuff prevented him from being on the field last year. But he signs back in Calgary, and I think that solves their left tackle issues. So I think they probably spent almost a lot of their money because of like signing a lot of these core guys that because they already had a pretty good roster. I honestly, it's like just because Bagleton only played just because Bagleton only played a couple games, like at the back half of the regular season last year, I kind of consider him almost like a free agent addition in himself. And you're basically, in my opinion, you're adding the best receiver in the entire CFL to your team. So I think Calgary should be much improved in that regard. If they can get Bo Levi Mitchell even up to a little bit like he was before middle 2019, before that injury or whatever, I think that team is going to be scary next year. Honestly, I think that's looking like a very complete offense, and defensively, they just always find a way to really, put it all together. Especially the Cameron Judge addition is very interesting. Yeah, they lose Darnell Sankey, but I think Cameron Judge will be very interesting at that weak side linebacker position. He was one of the best players in the league in 2019. So if he can, fit well again with in that linebacking core, Jameer Thurman's a hell of a player, can play both weak and the middle linebacker spot. So I think they'll be fine. And then the defensive back room maybe is the only place, and that's where like I said, I think you can find might see them make a few bargain signings there at the defensive back room. If Jamie Newman makes it out of camp, he could challenge for the backup in Hamilton. Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's more likely that he'll start on the practice squad like a lot of guys do, and they kind of have to work their way because a lot of it, especially with quarterback, is just like a learning curve. A lot of different aspects. You got to deal with the extra guy, accounting for the extra guy when you're reading coverages and reading blitzes and stuff like that. The width of the field a little bit different, adjusting the fact there's 3 downs instead of 4 as well. So I think there's a reason why you don't see a lot of like true rookie quarterbacks starting the CFL. And when you do, it usually looks pretty bad. Look at a guy like Johnny Manziel, and like Johnny Manziel, he was so hyped up, like when he came to CFL, and the noise was just so big about him playing that they didn't he wasn't able to get that year to learn. And a lot of these guys, a lot of the best quarterbacks that we have in the CFL had the time to sit on the bench for a few years. A lot of time they had to pay their dues as backups. Guys like Cody Fajardo had to wait for 3 years. Sorry, phone going off here. But yeah, no, I think that the key is just to give these guys some development time, and I think that's kind of what could happen in Ottawa, because you got a couple intriguing little backup options in Duck Hodges and Caleb Evans. And now you have Jeremiah Mazzoli there to hold down the fort for a couple years, and potentially allow those guys to develop. So, and a lot of the time you get quarterback injuries in a long 18-game CFL season, and it's not like these guys may see playing time anyway. So I think it's Jamie Newman. I think it's best case scenario. Yeah, he's a backup and gets a chance to learn, but hopefully he doesn't get rushed onto the field too quickly, like a lot of other guys in the past. Oh, here we go. I was just talking a few minutes ago about Shaq Johnson. He is signed with the Ottawa Redblacks. They just keep winning, man. They just keep winning. Just massive upgrades to this roster. Because I was going to say, yeah, they need receiving depth, and I think now they can probably start the two Canadians at receiver. You have Darvin Adams, you have Jalen Acklin, Ryan Davis, who looked pretty good for them last year, and then you could probably you could start the 2 Canadian guys in Nate Bahar and Shaq Johnson at receiver, and you'll be that's a pretty good unit. And you could still add to that, and you can I think you could still use a number 1 quote unquote receiver, but it is miles better than whatever they were throwing out there last season with Ryan Davis really their really lone bright spot there. So I think that's a really good signing. Shaq Johnson to the Berkey on a tear. Yeah, man, what a signing there. Naming him as GM, having a guy that has connections, especially in this league, is so important too. If you have a guy that just knows a lot of players, and like I said, comes from a successful organization like Hamilton, then you're gonna have a lot better of a chance of success, in my opinion. Sure. I remember when he was a PR guy for Hamilton. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. So he was a practice roster guy? A practice roster? Or is it like a public relations guy? Oh yeah, cool. That's awesome. I did not know that about Sean Burke, but clearly a hell of a GM already, honestly. And who knows how much of the work he was doing in Hamilton, honestly, with a lot of recruitment and stuff like that. And this is all public relations. Yeah, that's so cool. It's probably what I'll get into with my, I'm taking marketing in school, so love to get into something like that for an organization. Yeah, not. Apparently, Micah Alway is waiting on a potential NFL opportunity before making a CFL decision. So I'm not too sure if he gets picked up in the NFL. He had a pretty good season last year, but he's been in the CFL for a while, so I'm not too sure how much interest it is down there. But clearly, he's probably getting some workouts or been in touch with other teams down there if he's waiting off on making a decision here. He took care of the money. Man. Yeah, I wish some more signings were happening. We could have react to some more stuff, but clearly the market's kind of like quieting down. There was a lot of more the initial stuff that broke during the negotiation window, and then now it's kind of slowed down. Oh, Burke did all the contracts the last few years. That's great. Yeah. Because Hamilton really the last couple of years, you just look at that roster. It was full of guys that were former all-stars on other teams as well, and in addition to the guys that had been there for a long time. So yeah. I don't know. Maybe we'll do something fun, just because nothing's really happening here, guys. Maybe I'll do a little bit of a early power rankings here on the whiteboard here. All right. So, yeah, honestly, appreciate the fact that we didn't have any build up to the season this year was kind of it was just no preseason game or anything like that. It didn't really give us much chance to get back into the mood of things. So I'm really excited for more of a normal season this year with a full 18 games, especially. Just really excited. And last year, it was obviously great to have the CFL back, but there was some of the schedules for some of the teams that not having kind of a balanced schedule with certain teams not playing each other twice and stuff like that. And I'm just looking forward to seeing everything come back into balance this year, honestly. Apparently the Bombers have no offers for Harris, so he's not returning. Doesn't really surprise me, man, with the whole other guys they had. Other guys that they've already had sign Oliveira and Augustine. I think they're just trying to go younger at that position. And, I think both Augustine and Oliveira have shown they can play. All right. And I'm gonna do Burke, when he came to Hamilton, was director of football administration and director of community relations and communications. Man, it's interesting to see where a lot of these personnel guys come from, how they worked their way into the organization, or if they were on the more of the football side, especially the GMs a lot of the time, because a lot of the times they don't really have backgrounds in in football. You see a lot of like professional sports teams hiring like player agents now as like GMs and stuff. I think the new general manager of the Canucks that was like that, but I know like the general manager for the Lakers for a while, Rob Pelinka, was former player agent and stuff like that. So it's always interesting to see like the background on a lot of these guys. All right. So until something else breaks, I'm gonna do just not very well articulated on the spot here. Early power rankings for next year. Random question. Duke said he will be changing his jersey number. What numbers would you want to see him in? What number is he currently? Is he like... I'm honestly like, I'm always bad with like actually like remembering jersey numbers when I'm not actually watching the game. I don't know. I like the number... I think the number's like 88 or something like that for a receiver. I'm kind of basic in that sense, but honestly, and I always joke that it's like the NFL made it like so you can like be like a single digit like numbers any position except for offensive line this year, and I think the CFL has always had that option, but I was always make the joke to my brother. I'm like, I feel like you should be good if you have a single digit number. You have to. It makes sure you stand out so much more if you're like number one. Like if you're like, I've seen some random players in the NFL wearing the number one, and it's like, who are you again? It should be a guy like Jamar Chase who's on the Bengals, right? Something like that. If the Riders sign Harris, I'm gonna lose my mind. Yeah, no, I think a lot of people will be losing their mind because like he's really just built up such a legend in Winnipeg the last few years, and it's like, I mean, you could argue he's the greatest Canadian running back ever. I mean, there's other guys in the conversation, Normie Kwong and like John Cornish and stuff like that, but he's right up there. My guess is Ed Hervey is doing the contracts for Hamilton. Yeah, no, like when it surprised me, he was very heavily involved in BC, obviously as the general manager, has a lot of experience, and I bet Orlando Steinhauer actually has a lot on his plate as like obviously the head coach and the president of football operations. Right. So at number one, early power rankings for next year. Just this little bit. Yeah, I go with Winnipeg. You still got to say Winnipeg's number one, right? They brought in so many players back that and they were just such a dominant team that you have to say they're number one still. But I think at number two is where it gets really interesting because I think Hamilton's really, looks like they've lost some key pieces here, right? So I'm going to go with the Calgary Stampeders. All right, like I think they're just primed for a really quote unquote bounce back season next year. Had a little bit of a down, obviously a down year by their standards, and I think quarterback play had a lot to do with it, and their the fact that a lot of the receivers were the receiving core wasn't as good as it had been in years past with Bagleton missing a lot of time, right? So I think, but I think Calgary with the re-signings, Bagleton being back for a full season, they're right there, honestly, for I think in terms of competing with Winnipeg for a Grey Cup next year. At number three, so this is where it gets really freaking tough, honestly. I'm gonna still go with Hamilton. I'm still gonna say Hamilton's third, but it's getting so close. It's really tightening up in this middle section of the standings. But yeah, I'm gonna say Hamilton's third, and then fourth, I'm gonna say I think Saskatchewan, with their moves that they've made, I would still say they're right there. And then 5 to 7, I think it's like a really big bunch of all the East teams. So it's in Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto. But I think you could interchange a lot of these guys, honestly. And yeah, I think Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, whatever order you want to put that in, I think that's where it goes. And then 8th, I'll go with Edmonton. I'll go with Edmonton over BC. I just don't have much faith in I just don't have much faith in BC, honestly, like turning it around. Just given the fact they still have a lot of weaknesses that they haven't addressed, and they should have done what Ottawa did, and really went out and addressed that offensive line, and should have really went at hard after a Comrie Williams and guys like that, maybe a Jagarrett Davis and stuff. They really needed just difference makers in the trenches, and I don't think they have that yet. And Edmonton, I think I'll put them at 8 just because of the Chris Jones factor. But that's, kind of how I'm viewing the CFL right now. In terms of, obviously a lot still to come this offseason, but that's kind of how I view the hierarchy right now. Oh, it's official. BC Lions add Michael O'Connor, man. That's so exciting. Montreal in 4th. Yeah, no, I definitely considered that. Like, yeah, like the margins I think are so close right now between a lot of these teams, and for the Riders, I don't know. O'Day cutting vets to try and bring in O-line help and re-sign Duke for the Riders. I don't know if it's gonna work. He's been getting killed on local media out here. Yeah, like I still think Saskatchewan has just a really solid roster. But now, actually, now that I think about it, I will change that. I'll put Montreal forward, because I think I'll still take Vernon Adams over Cody Fajardo, and I think they're like those losses in the secondary of Ed Gainey and Purifoy could make a huge difference to this team. So I will take. Why did I race to 5? You have to see my my beautiful handwriting, guys. Yeah, going all in on the Canadian quarterback in BC, man. That's I really hope it does work out. I really do think, and I think BC. I don't know if I was gonna do like a favorite team ranking. Honestly, when I'm covering the league, I've become less and less like, bias for any for a lot of teams. Like I thought the Argos had a decent chance of making the Grey Cup. Obviously, one game away last year. It's like I was like, I don't care if the Argos win the Grey Cup. It's like I just want to see a great football game. And but I was gonna say, like, if I would say rank my top 9 like the teams like favorite to least favorite, right? Hamilton number 1, but I think BC is my second favorite team in the CFL, actually. Who would be a possibility to back up Collaros? I just think who else is out there right now, and I brought up the possibility of Matt Nichols coming back earlier, but apparently he's considering retirement. It's completely up in the air, I think, in terms of that, but it's possible. I'll see who else is out there. I can just briefly look at this. I think Isaac Harker of Saskatchewan, he's had some experience. It's possible to bring him in, or they still have that kid Drew Brown from last year, right? So, I think he's under contract for next year. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Winnipeg does at that backup spot, because, or maybe a David Watford even for Hamilton, but yeah, I don't know what Winnipeg's going to do at the backup spot, but I think they really should try to bring in a decent insurance policy because Collaros' career history, man, it wasn't like last year's kind of the aberration of the outlier in his career, because he usually hasn't been able to he hasn't really been able to stay healthy in a lot of years of his career. So who would be possible backup? Brown, the only quarterback on the roster right now. Oh, what about Collaros signed his deal though, right? I thought that was official a few weeks ago. But what's happening with Chad Kelly? I don't know. Let's find out. I think, is he under contract for that? Let me just take a look here. Is he even on the roster? Yeah, I'm not too sure what's going on with Chad Kelly. Honestly, I think he was rumored to be coming up here, right? I'm not too sure if he officially signed the contract. Check out TSN's newest video on free agency. I definitely will. Yeah, 67 combined career attempts between or pass completions between O'Connor and Rourke. So I hope it works out with both the Canadian guys, but I think that's a lot of risk to take, I think, especially with the coaching staff there and Rick Campbell, that they need to win this year. So yeah, Chad Kelly, who played for Ole Miss, I think I think he said something about coming up here to Canada at one point a while back, but no, I don't see him on the roster or anything. So Drew Brown is the only other quarterback on the Bomber roster. Yeah, so they'll definitely be adding another piece there at the quarterback position. I would expect it to be more of the CFL experienced type instead of like a rookie or like an American free agent. But like I said, there's the options out there are pretty limited. But I could see, like I said, Isaac Harker or David Watford could be a potential fit there for them. Or who's that guy for backup for Toronto last year? Who's that guy's name? What you call? I started for Montreal first game of 2019. Yeah, I'm trying to think what the guy's name is. Oh, Pipkin, Antonio Pipkin. Maybe he's an option for some teams out there as well. So I don't know if he's under contract for Toronto next year, but he said it was okay. Yeah, maybe just nothing materialized. That's so weird. But I always say that these big name guys, like I feel like a lot of fans, they like kind of like, I jump on them. It's like when these big name guys come up here and fail, and it's like to a certain extent, I agree with that. Like it's like it really shows you the CFL is no pushover of a league, but I'd like to see some of these bigger name guys succeed every once in a while, right? Like it would be really good for having the name recognition in the sport. Like I would have loved to see Manziel actually succeed, but obviously he didn't have the the tools, or it's been 3 hours. Yeah, I know. It just flies by, honestly. You guys, thank you for keeping me company because it probably would have been pretty boring if this is just not a lot happening. Elk signed defensive tackle McConaughey. That was kind of rumored a few hours ago, but that's a good pickup for the middle of the defense. Not a guy that's going to rush the passer a whole ton, but is going to be very good to really good in terms of stopping the run for that team. There's some toughness to that defensive line. Obviously, can be one of their Canadian starters too. So I think that McConaughey is a good fit for them. All right, guys. I think I'm gonna. I think I'll stay on till like 3:00. So, and if nothing's happened by then, unless something groundbreaking happens, I'll head off at 3. But yeah, thanks so much for joining me again, guys. It's been so much fun. I'll definitely do this. We'll definitely do this for the draft, and maybe we'll just do like a random hangout stream or something like that. We'll talk about CFL news and stuff. Yeah, and the reason why BC would do this with these Canadian quarterbacks, and I think it's the primary thing is to save money, right? They're barely paying anything to Rourke, and I'm sure the contract to O'Connor will be very minimal. Would be very minimal. So they're spending very little on the quarterback position, so they could spend, in theory, a lot of money on the rest of the roster. But the problem is, in terms of the offensive line, which they really need, they don't really have. There's not many options out there now on the market because Ottawa has really scooped up a lot of those guys. They even stole one of their own BC's better offensive linemen away from them in Hunter Stewart. So, are there still any good remaining defensive tackles for the Riders to get? I think Ted Laurent could be. Oh no, Ted Laurent actually re-signed with the Ticats. What am I saying? I thought he would have been a good fit for that team, but the Hamilton decided to bring him back, and they have like 3 really good freaking defensive tackles for next year. But let's look at this list here. I think there's some like. It depends on if you're talking about like a Canadian option or an American option at a defensive line, because obviously losing Henry's not going to be very good. Oh, William Powell officially signed with the Redblacks. Just a really good feel-good story there. Coming back home, coming back to where he spent a lot of his best years of his career. And I think Saskatchewan was ready to wanted to give Jamal Morrow a chance to be that guy in the backfield too. So I think it works for both teams. Let's see if there's any good defensive linemen. Yeah, there's not a lot of there is potentially there's a guy you could look out for if you're I was wondering if they're going to make the quarterback a ratio position now with the BC doing that. I don't know why quarterback didn't count as a ratio position anyway. Like I don't know. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But what was it to say? One guy to keep an eye out for, Brandon, is Drake Nevis of the Toronto Argonauts. Amazing run-stuffing defensive lineman in 2019 with Winnipeg. And then dealt with a lot of injuries this year in Toronto and didn't really get on the field too much. So maybe he's an under-the-radar guy that could potentially be a guy to be picked up. But again, he's an American guy. So I don't know. They might have to change around the ratio where they're starting their Canadians because of Henry leaving. And there's just not that many quality Canadian defensive tackles available. Coleman back with Ottawa. I thought he was one of their better defensive players last year. And so I agree with that re-signing. Which year has been the most entertaining in terms of free agency? Well, I think you'd have to just go back to 2019, right? With all the quarterbacks changing teams and like just the extent of the contracts for those quarterbacks, right? You had Mike Riley leaving the Edmonton Eskimos for the BC Lions for what was it, $750K a year. You had Bolivia Mitchell, like there was rumors that like Toronto had thrown a huge offer at him, but he ultimately stays in Calgary. And then Trevor Harris gets lured away from Ottawa and ends up going to Edmonton. And honestly, I think um, going back again, I feel like it would have been better for both sides for him to just stay in Ottawa. Because Ottawa obviously had to endure like just 2 dreadful seasons the past couple of years with horrible quarterback play, and then Harris obviously didn't work out for him in Edmonton. But though that offseason stands to mind, comes to my mind honestly in terms of like player movement because so many quarterbacks were involved in all of that. The Eskimos. Yeah, honestly, they'll say, like the name Eskimo is gonna come out sometimes, right? Especially when you're referring to like past teams and whatnot. But I try my best not to. I try my best to use Elks when I'm like talking about the current, state of the team. Berkey has been working. Yeah, no, he's well. What a pickup for Ottawa. The outlook for this team just is completely changed for next year. Because it was basically just 2 years or 3 years of neglect of this roster, honestly. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom, guys. I'll be back in 2 seconds. All right. I'm back. Still waiting for Sean Lemon to sign, hoping Hamilton. Yeah. Well, like I think that's it almost makes the most sense for Lemon as well. Like it obviously makes a lot of sense for Hamilton, but I think with Lemon, it's I think Hamilton represents like a really good chance to make it to the Grey Cup as well. Obviously I don't think he's coming back to Calgary. But I think a quarterback, a defensive end needy team as well. Maybe BC is an option as well. But again, I think BC doesn't represent as much of a chance of getting to the Grey Cup as well. And I think Hamilton, I wonder how much Lemon is going to get paid on the next contract. I'll be very interested to see if those numbers leak out. So while we're here, guys, I was wondering what you guys would like to see in terms of content the next little while on any video suggestions you guys want to see? Did you like Ottawa when they were named the Renegades? So this is right